The day of Clara's concert, my heart raced all morning. Was Philip still coming to the concert as he had promised Clara? I knew it was best if he stayed away, but I longed to see him. I was pacing the floor in the parlour when Uncle Otto came home. His hours at the cinema were erratic, and he often took a nap at home before lunch. It was only when he walked into the room and I saw the frown on his face that I realized something was wrong. "I've received a letter from Dr. Holub," he said, reaching into his pocket and unfolding a piece of paper. I stared at the letter in Uncle Otto's hand. What did he say? "Milos has left for America." I sank down onto the couch. It was 2 years since Clara and I had arrived in Australia. "He's looking for us, isn't he?" Uncle Otto bit his lip. "Milos has told clients it's a business trip to find suppliers of oak wood, but we can guess its real purpose. Dr. Holub says Milos has appeared in public with his mistress. Perhaps she won't marry him unless he secures a fortune." My skin prickled. Mother had bought Milos a partnership in a successful firm, but it was not enough for Pani Benyova. Secure a fortune, what a euphemism, I thought. It meant to get rid of us. "We are not there," I said. "What do you think will happen when he can't find us?" "America is a vast land. Even if you were there, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Whatever he hopes to achieve, it has given us time." "Did Dr. Holub say anything about Aunt Josephine?" I asked. A smile softened the strained look on Uncle Otto's face. "Yes," he said. "He has included a note from her." He handed me a piece of blue paper. My eyes filled with tears when I recognized my aunt's handwriting. She wrote that she thought of us every day, and that she would soon be visiting Marianske Lajne, a spa town, and would write to us properly from there. "I wish I could tell her what I'm doing with my photography," I said. Uncle Otto placed his hand on my wrist. "We will find a way to do that," he promised. Uncle Otto and I agreed to keep the content of Dr. Holub's letter to ourselves. There was no need to alarm the others, especially Clara, who was looking forward to performing that afternoon. She twirled in front of the mirror in the sapphire gown Ranjana and I had made her until she was dizzy. When she walked out onto the stage in it, with an orchid corsage and her hair softly waved, she was breathtaking. Clara did not look like my little sister anymore. She was too sophisticated. In the past year she had grown willowy, all arms and legs and a long torso. I recalled the previous night when we were in the kitchen together preparing dinner. Uncle Otto was in the habit of stacking the plates on the top shelf, which I could not reach. "Where's the stool?" I had asked, looking under the bench. I turned to see Clara on her tiptoes, taking down the plates for me. I listened to Clara play and willed myself not to look around the auditorium for Philip. I thought of the first time I had heard the concerto in Prague. Father had taken us to the concert hall before he left for the war. The hall was different from the conservatorium's auditorium, with its stark white walls and green chairs. I closed my eyes and remembered the feast of Art Nouveau trimmings, the stained glass windows and the sculptures. I imagined sinking into its velvet chairs and the warmth of the chandeliers dangling from the ornate ceiling. If Father had not been killed, Milos would never have come into our lives, and we would all still be together. The thought made me sad, and I opened my eyes and turned my attention back to the performance. The Grieg concerto suited Clara's style. The structure was simple and repetitive, but Clara and her classmates played each movement with such passion it was difficult to believe that the oldest of them was only 16. When they finished the final movement with ease, the audience stood up and filled the auditorium with the sound of applause. I forgot myself and looked in the direction of the dress circle. Philip was sitting there with Robert and Frederick. Beatrice was not with them. I barely heard Mendelssohn's violin concerto or Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique after that. At the party given afterwards, I trembled when Philip approached us with Robert and Frederick. My heart thumped so loudly I was surprised nobody else seemed to hear it. "Miss Rose, you were marvellous," Robert gushed to Clara. "The strongest artist in a program of fine artists. What a gift to our country that you have come here." Clara blushed with the praise. "Thank you very much." I introduced Clara to Robert and explained to her that he was a guest lecturer at the Conservatorium of Music. I was aware of Philip's eyes on me. "My orchestrion has finally arrived," said Robert. "I would very much like to have you both to an afternoon tea to christen it." "We would be honoured," I told him. I could not bring myself to look in Philip's direction, although I felt him lingering next to Robert. I turned away and caught Frederick eyeing my new dress, a pink chiffon gown with a layered skirt. "I like the way the waistline is higher than the current fashion," he said, circling me. "You look like a ballerina. It's a flattering style for a petite woman." I smiled, but thought that Frederick had a funny way of giving a woman a compliment. He was like a mechanic looking over a car. Ranjana and Uncle Ota, who had been talking with Clara's teacher, joined us. No sooner had I introduced them to Robert than a waiter weaved his way around the room, ringing a bell. "Time for us to leave," said Robert. "But it's early," said Frederick, inspecting his watch. "Who can listen to stirring music, then just go back to the office?" "Exactly," agreed Robert, "but they need the hall for the conservatorium students to practice." Frederick turned to Uncle Ota. "Would you and your family care to stroll around the Botanic Gardens with us? The weather is magnificent." Ranjana glanced at Uncle Ota. Frederick's effort to be cordial surprised her, but it was hard to look past the red pockets and lapels of his suit. "My wife and I must get to the cinema for the evening session," Uncle Ota told him, "but please accompany Clara and Adela for an hour or so." "We'd be delighted," said Robert. The afternoon was sunny, with a gentle breeze rising up from the harbour. The gravel of the path crunched beneath our feet. We walked towards the tea-house where Robert had suggested we celebrate Clara's performance with vanilla ice cream. "That's exactly what we should do," Philip said, his eyes briefly meeting mine. "Clara has done more than triumph in music. She has triumphed in life." The table in the cafe was small, and everyone apologized to each other when we bumped knees while taking our seats. Robert and Clara shared stories about Indian musical instruments. Clara told the men about Uncle Ota's collection, including a string instrument called a sarangi, on which she and Uncle Ota had somehow worked out how to play a Bulgarian folk dance. Philip was sitting so near to me that I could feel the warmth of his body penetrating the air between us. His fingers lingered near my teacup. I experienced everything with a heightened consciousness. The smoothness of the ice cream, the raspberry scent of the tea, the polished wooden table under my wrist. In all the pangs I had suffered thinking about Philip, I could never have imagined the sweetness of being together. After the ice cream, we continued our walk through the gardens along the path to the ponds. A child ran past, chasing a ball that was gathering momentum as it rushed down the hill towards the water. Frederick and Robert sped after it, with Clara, her concert dress hitched up to her knees, after them. Philip slipped his arm through mine. "Come," he said. I hardly noticed where he was leading me until we stood in a grove of trees sheltered from the sight of the others. He grabbed my hands and we clung to each other like two frightened children. His eyes searched my face. The breeze blew through the trees and rustled my dress and hair. Philip threw his arms around my waist and his lips swept over my face in search of mine. I felt delirious, as if I was sinking into a dream, but I woke from it with a start. "No, stop," I said, pushing him away. "Beatrice, you're engaged now." Philip's eyes flickered. Perhaps now that she has finally agreed, it's me who's not sure. I swallowed. "Why do you say that?" "When I'm with you, I feel things I don't with her. I'm engaged to the wrong woman." Since that day in the car, whenever I thought about Philip, I tried to imagine that Beatrice was his sister. I was happiest when I could abandon myself to such fantasies. But fantasies could not become real. "Am I frightening you, Adela?" Philip asked, his voice unsteady. "Or do you feel it too?" If it was love he was feeling, then my heart was burning with it. I saw now that the flame had been ignited the first time I had met him in his cramped office and had grown steadily ever since. Now it was like a forest fire, in danger of engulfing everything. "Yes," I stammered. I love you. I love everything about you. But I don't want you to break off your engagement, not unless you are sure." "I am sure," he said, stepping towards me. I rejected his embrace. "No, don't see me for a month," I told him. "Be only with Beatrice. If you still feel the same way, then I will see you, but not before then." I heard the excited voices of Clara and the others returning from the pond. I rushed out of the grove to meet them. The boy was on Robert's shoulders, his rescued ball in his hands. Frederick was helping Clara, whose shoes were slipping on the grass, back up the hill. Philip brushed his fingers down my back, then moved a step away. Frederick drove us home, along with Robert, because Philip had to return to Broughton Hall for the evening rounds. Once we were in the house, I wanted nothing more than to take off my dress and disappear under the bed covers. I was about to run up the stairs when Clara put her hand on my arm. She was too astute not to have guessed the cause of my distraction. "You're in love with Dr. Page, aren't you?" she said. "God help me," I told her. "He is engaged to his childhood sweetheart. She is a wonderful person. I don't want to hurt her. I don't know what to do." Clara took a step towards me. There was love in her eyes, but I did not feel I deserved it. "I can't blame Philip for falling in love with you," she said. "Who couldn't? And you are well suited." "But Beatrice?" Clara looked away and nodded. She was at as much of a loss as I was about the answer to that problem. Uncle Ota screened The Ghost of Spooky Hill at Tilly's Cinema. The audience booed it so much that it only ran for 2 nights. The curtains and the tablecloth on the set kept flapping, and in one climactic scene I was caught in the frame with the slate in my hand. The redeeming points were that Peter did not seem to mind the audience's reaction, and that Hugh's cinematography was outstanding. If Hugh could get a start on one quality film, then he would have a magnificent career ahead of him. But there were few professional directors willing to give a one-legged cameraman a chance. One day I received a note from Hugh asking me to meet him at the vegetarian cafe the following afternoon. When I arrived, he was sitting in his usual booth with Giallo on his shoulder. "Hello, pretty," said Giallo, lifting his claw to scratch his head. "Where did he learn that?" I asked Hugh. "Is that what you say to him?" "No," said Hugh, almost smiling. "He just knows what I'm thinking." I laughed, pleased to see Hugh was in a good mood. I was not so vain as to think he was flirting with me. I was sure I was the only woman he could say that sort of thing to because he felt safe with me. We ordered cold milk and cheese sandwiches. When they arrived, Hugh spread his hands on the table. "I've got good news for you," he said. "Yet another Australian production company has gone to the wall, and I managed to persuade the assistant director to give me some end-of-reel pieces of film. I've got about 6 or 7 minutes worth. Enough for a decent short film. I can shoot something for you if you come up with a tight script." "Truly?" I asked, almost jumping out of my seat with joy. "You want to work with me?" I was over the moon that Hugh had remembered the conversation we'd had about making a picture together. He seemed as pleased as I was by the unexpected windfall. "The only problem will be the developing and editing," he said. "That can be expensive." "I can probably cover the development for a short film," I told him, "and my aunt can do the editing if you show her how." Hugh raised his eyebrows. "Quite often the films we get at the cinema are damaged. Ranjana has to cut and splice all the time," I told him. "She's good at it." "Well then, you just need actors now." "Oh, I have those," I said. "I think it's time you met my family." My good fortune in finding a talented cameraman and a supply of film was a welcome distraction from thinking about Philip. I had told him not to see me for a month, but found myself fretting that I had not heard from him. Perhaps he had forgotten me and was busy planning his wedding. That would be better for everybody, but the idea vexed me so much that one afternoon on my way to the cinema I did not look where I was going and was almost run over by a tram. In the end, I decided the only solution was not to allow myself to think about Philip at all. I sat with Esther's old typewriter under the silver gum and wrote a short film about a picnic where a boy sees a bunyip, but nobody believes him. Uncle Ota and Clara agreed to act in the picture, while Esther took on the role of script girl and Ranjana offered to help with the catering. The boy was to be played by Mr. Tilley's nephew, Ben. It took us 2 days to make the film. Uncle Ota was a natural actor, but Clara stole the show. In one scene, she was sitting on the beach with Ben. She had not noticed that the camera was rolling, and she was telling him about Mr. Rudolph. Her animated facial expressions and Ben's delight were magic. When Clara glanced at the camera and saw that Hugh was filming, she brought her hand to her cheek and smiled. Her face lit up with an incandescent beauty. "You were right," said Hugh when we took a short meal break before moving the camera. "Your family are actors." Everyone sat down on a picnic blanket to eat the sandwiches that Ranjana had prepared. I noticed that Esther was sneaking glances in Hugh's direction. There were tears in her eyes. Hugh and Esther's fiancé would have been about the same age. Her pity would irritate Hugh if he became aware of it. I diverted his attention to Jallo, who had moved himself to Thomas's shoulder. "Rather good," Thomas said to Jallo, pointing at the harbour. He was starting to speak in short phrases and in a mix of Czech and formal English. "Hiccup," Jallo cackled. "Hiccup," agreed Thomas. Ranjana burst into laughter. "God help us, my son is being taught to speak by a bird." "Oh well," said Uncle Ota, "not everyone can boast of a child fluent in English, Czech, Marwari, and cockatoo." Raymond Longford's film, The Blue Mountains Mystery, was scheduled to screen at Tilly Cinema in September. Uncle Ota suggested that we premiere my film as a short teaser before it. But in order to get it on the program, we had to edit it quickly. Ranjana, Hugh and I sat up after the last picture session each night for a week to cut and splice the film in the projection room. I'd had no idea that a 6-minute picture could be so time-consuming, and now understood why the editing of a feature film sometimes took months. "It's 3 o'clock in the morning," I said during one session, looking at my watch. Hugh had a part-time job in a studio the following day, so I told him to go home. There were only the final intertitles to be added, and Ranjana and I could finish the edit in the morning. When we returned home, Ranjana's eyes were drooping with exhaustion. "Would you like a cup of tea?" I asked her. She shook her head. "I'm going to check on Thomas, then go to bed," she said. I was physically tired, but my brain was racing. I was hungry, too. I walked into the kitchen and switched on the light. I jumped when I saw Esther sitting there. "It was the war, wasn't it?" she asked, pushing back her hair. "That's how he lost his leg." It was 4 in the morning. Esther was usually in bed by 10. She had been waiting up for me. I told her what I knew of Hugh's story. When I reached the part about being found outside Sydney Hospital, she rubbed her thumbs together but said nothing. The following morning, Ranjana and I rose early to complete the editing before the first morning session. Esther came with us to catch up on the bookkeeping. It was a chilly morning, and I wound my scarf over my head while we waited for the tram. "It wouldn't have made any difference to me if Louis had come home without his legs," Esther suddenly announced. "I still would have loved him." The tram arrived, and we double-checked the bags we were carrying to make sure we left nothing behind. Esther slipped the strap of her satchel over her shoulder. I blinked. There was the butterfly resting on her arm. Esther's eyes met mine. I turned away, not wanting to upset her all over again about not being able to see the butterfly. Trying not to think of Philip was like trying to unlearn to ride a bicycle. I could go a few hours without dwelling on our situation, but the postman's whistle always triggered my thoughts in his direction. It was wrong to pine for Philip, but I secretly hoped that he would send me a letter. Then, a month to the day that we had talked in the Botanic Gardens, Philip appeared on our doorstep wearing a pair of +4s and a vest over a white shirt. "I promised to take Adela to the National Park to photograph the rock formations," he explained to a surprised Uncle Ota. "Has she forgotten?" "Indeed, I think she has," said Uncle Ota, inviting Philip into the house. Clara, who was finishing her breakfast before leaving for school, sent me a glance. "Adela," said Uncle Ota, "you'd better hurry and get ready. The National Park is a few hours' drive away." I was as embarrassed as if I had actually forgotten the arrangement, although we had never made such plans. Philip grinned at me. Clara followed me to the bedroom. "Bring a swimming costume," Philip called after me. "The lagoon is sheltered. It should be quite warm today." I quickly changed into a loose dress, while Clara packed a towel, sun hat, and swimsuit into a bag. Who went swimming in winter? But I did not think too much about that. Philip's appearance had answered the question that had been hanging over me for a month. "I don't know what to do," I said to Clara. "Yes, you do," she replied. She took my hand. "Listen to your heart. Philip is a good person, and you are too. Neither of you will do anything reckless. But you have to do what is honest, even if someone else won't like it." Philip's car rattled along the dirt track into the park. I stared up at the towering gum trees. "I'll take you to Wattle Beach," he said, smiling. "It's my favorite spot in the park." The menthol scent of the gums and the smell of damp earth were intoxicating. I glanced at Philip. He looked fresh and carefree. Had he told Beatrice? Had she accepted his decision gracefully? My heart leapt with hope as each mile passed. Philip reached across the seat and squeezed my hand. A thrill of joy ran through me. He brought the car to a stop, and we strolled along a track past banksias and cabbage tree palms to a clearing. I could see a sandy beach and the ocean below us. The beach was deserted except for a lone fisherman. "Put your swimming costume on," said Philip, turning his back to me and tugging off his vest and shirt. He undid his belt and slipped his trousers and underwear down his legs and kicked them off. I blushed at the sight of his buttocks, more athletic than I had expected from a doctor. He pulled on his swimming trunks, and I realized out of modesty he had intended for me to turn my back to his while we changed. I spun around and undid my dress and stockings, pulling my costume up my legs and over my shoulders. When I turned back, Philip had already climbed out on the rock ledge. He beckoned me to follow him and offered his hand. I took it and inched after him on the slippery rocks to the cascading waterfall. "It's safe," he told me. "We can jump from here into the lagoon. Ready?" I flew with him into the air and plunged into the lagoon. The freezing water sent goosebumps over my skin. I broke the surface and looked for Philip. He surfaced a second later, pushing his hair from his face and swimming towards me. "Bracing?" he said. "Not at all," I laughed. "I've swum in colder. I'm a Czech, you know." I saw that he was not the same Dr. Page of Broughton Hall. Droplets of water shone on his sun-kissed skin. He swam towards the sandbank, and I followed him. "Wait here," he said when we emerged from the water. "I'll go back and get our things." I watched him scramble up the slope to retrieve our clothes and bags. He returned and spread out a blanket for us to sit on. The sun warmed us, and the sound of the water lapping against the rocks made me sleepy. "So what have you been doing with yourself this past month?" he asked. I told him about the Bunyip picture. He leaned back on his elbows. "I should like to see it," he said. "I can tell from your photographs that you're talented. Do you like it here in Australia?" I cast my eyes over the rugged cliffs and the cascading waterfall. Clara was not the only one of us sensitive to the appeal of natural beauty. "Very much," I said. "It is spectacular." "I was brought up to think of England as home," Philip said. "My children's books were filled with hedgehogs and badgers. But when I arrived in London for my studies, I longed for gum trees, kangaroos, and beaches." We laughed. Then I remembered Prague, the cobblestoned streets and the markets. My thoughts darkened. "Does it bother you," Philip asked, "to think that your mother's killer may never be brought to justice?" "It did at first," I told him, "but if I keep thinking of it, I will go mad. I concentrate on what I can do, and that is to help Clara through music school and safely to the age of 21. Philip nodded and looked out to the ocean. His face twitched. "My mother was in our house in Bowral," he said. "Father and I were out riding when a flame jumped out of the fireplace and started to burn the floor. The house was a pioneer's home and was ablaze within minutes. The servants managed to escape and formed a chain to the dam to try and save it, but Mother was trapped in her room on the top floor. My father and I saw the flames from 2 miles away. We galloped home, but everything was gone except a staircase and the chimney. For months afterwards, I imagined my mother's screams in my sleep." A seagull squawked overhead, and we looked up at the blue sky and the clouds moving across it. There was nothing we could say to each other about our mothers' deaths, but we knew that the other one understood. I felt that I had known Philip all my life, and our conversations were simply to fill in the details. "Is that why you became a psychiatrist?" I asked eventually. "To help people with bad memories?" The torment disappeared from Philip's face. He smiled. "My father would be dismayed if he knew that he inspired me to study psychiatry. He wasn't always so serious. He became nervous after Mother's death and now clings to familiar things, fearful that they will change." "Life changes all the time, doesn't it?" I said. "You have to adapt yourself to it." Philip took my hand. My skin tingled with his touch. It seemed the most natural thing in the world to be sitting in this beautiful place and holding his hand. "Does Beatrice know?" I asked. He shook his head. "Helen has an inoperable tumor. Beatrice doesn't quite believe it. It's going to be hard for her. She and her mother are very close. We will have to be patient. I don't like to sneak around behind her back any more than you do, but I have to pick my timing." "Then you are sure?" I asked him. "About us?" Philip clasped my hand tighter and pressed it against his chest. "I love you, Adela." The disappointment I had felt that he had not yet told Beatrice disappeared with those words. Tears filled my eyes. Philip looked down the beach. The fishermen had gone. "Come," he said, helping me to my feet. He picked up the picnic blanket and moved it to a shady spot set back in the trees. When he had spread it out, we lay down and he pulled me to him and kissed me on the lips. His mouth was warm and velvety. His kisses swept down my neck. I stared up at the glimmering trees. I was a virgin and could never have imagined the ripples of pleasure his kisses sent through me. I ran my palms over his smooth, damp skin and felt the shiver of his muscles. Philip knelt back and we fell silent, with only the sound of the rolling ocean and the birds about us. I wanted him to kiss me again and lifted myself towards him, but my hand caught the edge of my costume and the strap slipped down and exposed my breast. I was too mortified to think about covering myself up. Philip lifted his hand to my breast and brushed his fingers over the nipple. My shame turned to desire. He withdrew his hand quickly. I wanted him to touch my breast again and kiss it the same way he had kissed my face. But he tugged my costume back over my shoulder. "I want you more than anything in the world," he said, his voice trembling. "But we must wait for the right time. I want our love to be special." I sat up and he pressed his cheek to mine. His hair smelt of the ocean. "We must marry first," he said. "I want to give you a child. I want it all to be perfect." "Yes," I said. Everything was perfect. Almost. Chapter 13. I awoke the next morning with the sun making lacework on my arms through the curtains. I wanted to lie like that for hours, relishing the memory of the previous day with Philip. But Esther's voice at the door brought me to my senses. "A note came for you," she said. "It was delivered by a chauffeur." I clambered out of bed, expecting something from Philip. I was discomfited to receive a message from Beatrice. "Dear Adela, it has been too long since I saw my lovely friend. I am sorry I have been out of touch, but my wedding plans and trip to Europe have been on hold as Mother's health has taken a turn for the worse. I miss my walks through the city with her. We seemed to discover so many curiosities that it was my greatest pleasure. I wondered if you might accompany me one day in her place. Soon. I miss your smiling face. Your friend, Beatrice." The tone of the letter suggested that Beatrice was being brave. She sounded as though she needed a friend. I remembered Edith had not come to the luncheon because she was staying in the country. I was not the right person to comfort Beatrice, but what could I do? She needed someone. I called her from the cinema and arranged to meet her in the city in the afternoon. "How good of you to come," said Beatrice, rising from her bench in Hyde Park, where we had agreed to meet. She was drawn in the face, but her eyes were as full of life as ever. She launched into a review of the book she had been reading while waiting for me. "It's about 4 young people at turning points in their lives," she explained. "In some ways it's horribly depressing because the 2 women subjugate themselves to the men, but it's also ripping good reading." Beatrice and I linked arms and headed towards the stores. She was in a better state of mind than I had been expecting. "I am very sorry to hear your mother is unwell," I told her. "It breaks my heart that I can't do anything for her," she said. "Old Dr. Page came this morning and gave her a dose of morphine to ease the pain." I lowered my eyes. What could I say? Beatrice nudged me. "Don't cry for us, Adela. You have a tranquility about you that is cheering. Besides, it's not all bad news. Philip might hurry up and set a date for our wedding." My pulse quickened. I wondered if she would feel it through my arm. I had hoped that Beatrice and I could avoid the subject of Philip. We strolled along Elizabeth Street, and a dress in a shop window caught Beatrice's eye. "Look at that glorious dress," she cried, pointing to a coral-beaded sheath. "Isn't it lovely?" The dress was pretty, but unsuitable for Beatrice. The colour would clash with her red hair, and the style would accentuate her lack of a figure. "Should I buy it?" she asked. The dress on the other mannequin in the window was a raspberry colour that would set off Beatrice's hair. The wide V shape of the neckline would give her a bust. A flattened chest was the fashion, but only worked on women with breasts to begin with. I sensed that Beatrice was looking to lift her spirits with a new dress, rather than having her heart set on the coral one, so I said, "Both these dresses are nice. Why don't you try them on and then decide which looks best?" Beatrice grabbed my arm. "Good idea." For a few moments, while we lost ourselves in trying on sumptuous dresses, I could almost put aside the fact that Beatrice was the obstacle to my being with Philip. I tried on a silk chiffon gown, the rose colour of which flattered my hair and eyes. The shop's prices were too high for me, but I decided I would choose a style I liked and make something similar for the premiere of my Bunyip picture. Ranjana was a skillful beader, and we could decorate the dress together. "That dress is lovely on you," said Beatrice, stopping to admire me. "You're like a little doll." Sadness flickered across her face. "What is it, Beatrice?" "You remind me of my friend, Margaret," she said, sitting down in a chair by the mirror. "She died in Egypt. We were nurses together in the war." "I didn't know you were a nurse," I said. Beatrice grimaced and ran her hand through her unruly hair. I was in awe of Beatrice. She had more courage than I had imagined. I wondered what Philip saw in me that he did not find in her. She had travelled and served in the war. I had not done anything significant. "Well, come on then," Beatrice said, slapping her knees and drawing herself out of her melancholy. "Let's get this dress." After Beatrice had purchased the raspberry dress, we ate lunch at a restaurant in Market Street before making our way to Chinatown. Beatrice steered me away from the headless ducks on hooks and crabs in tanks in the food stores and led me to a street lined with curiosity shops. "This is the place I love best," she said. "It's a treasure chest." We entered a shop piled with brocade cushion covers, drawstring handbags, embroidered slippers, parasols, and lanterns. Beatrice stopped to admire a green cheongsam on a hanger. "Tell me about Egypt," I said. She bowed her head and leaned against a hat stand. "Philip was stationed in Egypt as a medical officer," she said, looking back at me. "I went there to join him. I don't think any of us were prepared for the carnage. One day the ambulance I was driving to the hospital was shelled. Margaret was killed and I was shredded with shrapnel. When they got me to the hospital, no one expected me to survive. 'I promise to live if you will marry me,' I said to Philip, before they put me under." "So he promised?" I asked, trying to mask the tremble in my voice. Beatrice smiled dreamily. "I've been running around the world looking for excitement, but that's because I knew when the time was right, I would settle down with Philip. When Mrs. Page died, it was like losing my own mother. Even when we were children, she always said, 'You'll take care of my Philip if anything happens to me, Beatrice, won't you?' Her face turned serious. I will never break that promise. Never." We were silent for a moment, weighing up the gravity of her vow. "Is that why you joined up with the nurses when Philip was posted to Egypt?" I asked. Beatrice nodded. Her voice dropped to a whisper and she said, "Lately, Philip has been looking distracted. I'm afraid I've kept him waiting too long. I'm afraid that there's somebody else." A sickening feeling twisted my stomach. I clutched a row of shirts to hold myself upright. "Dear God, Adela," said Beatrice, grabbing my arm. "You're as white as a sheet. Here, let me help you." "It's the lack of air," I said, tugging at my collar. It was not the air. It was the guilt. Only the day before I had kissed Beatrice's fiancé on a secluded beach. "It is stuffy in here," agreed Beatrice, leading me to the door. In the next street was a French café, its blue tablecloths and baskets of bread incongruous with the calligraphy of the signs of the stores next to it and the smell of bamboo and rotten fish that permeated the air. We sat down at a table near the window. Beatrice ordered some water and a pot of tea. Despite the mildness of the weather, I shivered. "Maybe you've got influenza," said Beatrice. "Let me get you a taxi." "No, truly, I'm fine, Beatrice. It was just in there, in that shop." I hoped that she might change the subject from Philip. I tried to distract her with questions about her travels in England and on the continent, but each answer returned in some way to him. "I gave myself to Philip in Egypt," she said. The blood drained from my face. I should have been embarrassed at such a shared intimacy, but instead I was hurt. I thought about how Philip had restrained himself with me. "I want you more than anything in the world," he had said. I was shocked that he had been intimate with Beatrice. The only solace was that Philip and Beatrice had become lovers before he had met me. A sensation I could not explain passed over me. I glimpsed something inside of Beatrice that I had not noticed before, as if another person existed behind her freckles and energetic manner. But the feeling soon faded, and everything seemed normal again. After an hour had passed, I deemed that I had been polite enough and excused myself. I wanted to get away from Beatrice. I felt cold-blooded knowing that Philip was in love with me, and not her. I told Beatrice that I had to help Uncle Ota at the cinema. "Goodbye, Adela," she said, kissing my cheek. "I'm glad you could come out with me today." "Goodbye, Beatrice," I replied. She made no reference to seeing me again. The oddness of that only occurred to me as I walked to the tram stop. She seemed innocent of the nature of my relationship with Philip, yet I had the distinct feeling that I had been given a warning. When I arrived home, the sun had disappeared behind the clouds, and the world looked grey. I wanted to run upstairs and collapse onto my bed. But when I approached the gate, I found Uncle Ota on the front veranda with Frederick Rockcliffe. They both had a glass of beer in front of them and leant back in their chairs, looking relaxed. What is he doing here? I thought. Frederick's boisterous manner was the last thing I needed. Frederick jumped to his feet when he saw me. "Mr. Rockcliffe came by this afternoon to have his photograph taken by you," Uncle Ota explained. "I found out that he works for Galaxy Pictures, so I decided to get a better deal for our cinema. He likes the idea of a night a week devoted to Australian films." Frederick pulled out a chair for me. We had never discussed taking his photograph, and I was irritated that he had turned up without an appointment. But I did not want an argument. All I wanted was to find a way to extricate myself from the conversation so I could be alone. That's wonderful. I sat down and tried not to stare at Frederick's purple bow tie. I did not believe what he had told Uncle Ota about approving of a night dedicated to local films. From the discussion at Beatrice's luncheon, I knew that Frederick represented an American company with American interests. Clara walked out of the house with a tray of assorted nuts. Despite my effort to put a polite smile on my face, she could tell something was wrong. She cocked her eyebrow as if to say, "Are you all right?" I answered her by lowering my eyes in a way that conveyed, "We will talk about it later." "Do you mind if I practice in the front room, Uncle Ota?" Clara asked. "I don't want to disturb you and Mr. Rockcliffe, but I have a piano examination tomorrow." I hoped Frederick would take the request as a prompt to leave. Instead, he answered as if the question had been directed to him. "Not at all, Miss Rose. I'd be enchanted to hear you play again." Clara blushed with delight and returned to the house. "Mr. Rockcliffe has been telling me about opportunities to build cinemas on the South Coast," Uncle Ota said. "The pictures are increasing in popularity, but there aren't enough cinemas. They are watching picture shows in sheep fields and School of Arts halls." "This is apart from my interests with Galaxy Pictures," said Frederick. I wondered why he felt he had to explain that to me. What he did or did not do in accordance with Galaxy Pictures was no concern of mine. Uncle Ota and Frederick spoke about opportunities in country towns, but all I could hear were Beatrice's words in my head. "Philip has been looking distracted. I'm afraid that there's somebody else." Frederick gestured towards the plate of nuts, but I had no appetite. The sound of Clara's piano playing drifted on the air. "What is that music?" he asked. "The Ritual Fire Dance by Manuel de Falla," I answered. "Manuel de Falla," Frederick repeated, shaping his vowels to imitate my pronunciation of the Spanish composer's name. It had some queer buzzing notes at the beginning, like a swarm of bees gathering to attack. I was amused by Frederick's description of the music. He was the one who had not wanted to go back to work after the Grieg concerto because he had found it stirring. He did not use the term someone familiar with classical music might, but I liked the fact that his responses, although raw, were sincere. It is from a ballet called Love, the Magician. There are gypsies and witchcraft, I explained. A young woman is haunted by the jealous ghost of her deceased husband. The ritual fire dance is to get rid of him. Frederick was taken aback. "She tries to get rid of him?" "He was cruel. She has a handsome young lover." Frederick ran his thumb over his knuckles. I had the impression that he was absorbing the information for use at a later date. He turned to Uncle Ota. "You have talented nieces," he said, "a pianist and a photographer." I wondered where Frederick had gotten the idea of me taking his photograph. Had he seen some of my work at a socialite's house, or had Philip shown him the portrait I had taken of him and his father? But to ask him might start another train of conversation, and I wanted to avoid that. The aroma of Ranjana cooking dinner wafted from the house. Turmeric, garlic, and cinnamon. They were scents that never floated from the other houses on our street. For one tense moment I thought Uncle Ota might invite Frederick to stay to dinner, although I could not imagine him picking his way through vegetable kofta and sag paneer. "If you come Thursday morning, I can take your photograph then," I told Frederick, praying that he would take the hint from my voice that I was tired and he should go. To my relief, he stood up. It will be a pleasure to be photographed by you, Miss Rose. We saw Frederick to the gate and watched him climb into his car. He waved after he started the engine. See you Thursday! I watched the car turn the corner and regretted the brusqueness with which I had spoken to him. He was brash, but somehow polite, and despite the garishness of his suits, he was not unattractive. It probably was not easy to be an American in a culture that did not appreciate people speaking their minds. I told Uncle Ota that I was not feeling well and asked Ranjana to excuse me from dinner. My bed was the most welcome spectacle of the evening. I pressed my face into the pillow and cried all the tears that I had been holding back. I felt cursed that I had met Philip when Beatrice was engaged to him. I turned over and stared at the ceiling. Laughter burst up from the dining room, and I heard Thomas asking where I was. I could have been in Japan the way I felt. I was so removed from everyone else. I longed to open my heart to Clara, but exhaustion got the better of me, and I fell asleep before dinner was over, and she came upstairs. I awoke at 1 o'clock in the morning with Clara asleep beside me. I watched her peaceful face, unable to make up my mind about whether I should wake her or not. Then I remembered that she had a piano examination and did not want to disturb her. I slipped out of bed and padded down the hall to the upstairs sitting room. Uncle Ota had left the porch light on. In the glow of the lamp I saw Louis's ghost by the gate again. Just as before, he was wearing his military uniform and peering into the house. We are both on the outside of life looking in now, I thought. So, your uncle is a collector? Frederick asked when he arrived to have his picture taken. He was standing near the shelf with the African masks. My uncle gathered those pieces on his travels, I told him, and now we have our own museum. That red and black mask is from the Congo. The tribal chiefs wear such masks when making sacrifices to their ancestors. Frederick picked up the resin mask and studied its carvings. I could not help but smile. Frederick was wearing a red and black checked suit. He replaced the mask on its hook and moved on to the bookshelves, which sagged under the weight of our collective library. He ran his fingers along the plays by Shaw and Ibsen and the volumes of Nietzsche. The man of knowledge must be able to not only love his enemies, but also to hate his friends, he said, quoting the German philosopher. He turned to me. Have you read all these? My uncle read them on his voyages, but I am familiar with them too, I told him. And you, Frederick? Do you read? I realized that I had called him Frederick instead of Mr. Rockcliffe. I had picked up the habit of using Christian names from the Vegetarian Cafe and Beatrice, but he did not seem to mind. A smile came to his face and he shook his head. I don't have the luxury of time to read books, but I make sure I keep the company of those who do. I remembered a conversation between my father and mother that I had overheard as a child. Father had described an acquaintance of theirs as a self-made man. Gentlemen were supposed to despise men who had made their own money, but my father clearly admired him, just as Aunt Josephine respected women who earned their own living. Frederick Rockcliffe was a young man determined to lift himself up in the world. I decided that his portrait should be in sharp focus and taken from below. There were 2 spaces in the parlor where I photographed those clients who did not wish to have their picture taken at home. The first was a corner with an armchair upholstered in pink brocade and a still life in a gold frame above it. That was where most society ladies chose to be photographed. The other space was against a stark white wall. It was there that I planned to photograph Frederick. Why not against the bookshelf? He asked, when I showed him where I wanted him to sit. His suit would clash with the decor, so I wanted to keep the background simple. But I gave him a more diplomatic explanation. This portrait should be about you, not books, especially as you don't read them. Pretending to be something you are not doesn't show confidence. I knew that I had hit the right note when he smiled. He wanted to look powerful, not silly. My photograph would help him achieve that, and one day I would speak to him about his suits. Frederick sat on the stool against the wall. "Your uncle invited me to the premiere of your film," he said. "He gave it a glowing review, and I trust his judgment. I can get it distributed for you." "It's only a short," I told him. "Cinemas need those as well, you know." I mulled over Frederick's offer while adjusting my camera. I wanted to make pictures, and perhaps he could help me. But as the session continued, I decided working with him might be too difficult. He would not strike the simplest pose without questioning why he should do it. I asked him to turn his body while facing the camera, and we ended up in a half-hour argument over it. "It looks dishonest," he said, "like I'm about to run away, rather than fight something head-on." I appreciated that Frederick was aware of what he wanted, but not his manner of getting it. He wore me out. I was adjusting the lights when he quoted Nietzsche again. "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." I stood up and looked at him. "Pardon?" "That's my motto. Own yourself." The photographs I had taken would make Frederick look like his own man. It was interesting that we should have the same end in mind when our approaches to achieving it were so different. "I think you'll be happy with the result," I told him. "I know I will," he said to my surprise. "You know what you're doing." "When would you like to see the prince, Frederick?" I could not believe I had just called him by his Christian name again. "For God's sake, call me Freddie." He grinned. "You sound like my mother when you call me Frederick." "Then you must call me Adela," I told him. I was not comfortable to be on personal terms with Freddie, but there was nothing I could do about it. It was my own fault. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cigarette. "I can drop by this Saturday and take you and Clara to the party." "What party?" "Have you forgotten already? The one Robert is holding in honor of his orchestrion." In Prague, afternoon teas were intimate affairs with no more than a handful of guests gathered around a table spread with cakes and sandwiches. When Clara and I arrived with Freddie at Robert's house in Lindfield, intimate did not describe the number of people spilling out onto the verandas of the shingle-roofed mansion or standing on the lawn and tennis court. From the number of Packards, Bugattis, and Delages parked outside the fence, there must have been at least 50 guests. We stopped at the gate, and I looked for Philip, but could not see him. I had been unsettled by my conversation with Beatrice. Which one of us did he truly love? "Welcome," said Robert, rushing down the path towards us and opening the gate. "Come in." Robert's garden reflected his elegant and quirky personality. The house was framed by a massive lily-pilly tree. In its branches sat 2 red and green king parrots. The oak trees, although leafless because of winter, flickered shade across the lawn, and the path to the house was bordered by lavender in bloom. The path was geometrically tiled with an emu silhouette motif. The theme continued at the end of it, where a giant statue of the bird formed an archway with its legs. The air was fresh and without a trace of salt. The soil gave off a rich aroma, different from the rocky ground at Watson's Bay. Freddie was called to join the game of croquet that was taking place on the lawn. "Go on, be a gentleman," Robert told him. "I'll take care of Clara and Adela." "I'm sorry," Freddie said to us. "An apology is not needed," Clara replied. I sensed Freddie's reluctance to leave us and wondered why. The players were young women. Perhaps he was more interested in Robert's orchestrion than I had assumed. "Come and meet my mother and sister," said Robert, guiding us towards the house. "They are terribly shy. They encourage my parties, but always disappear somewhere on their own. I'm sure they will find you non-threatening conversationalists." Mother would have loved this house, I thought. The polished Jarrah floors, the winged chairs, the cream-embossed wallpaper and tiled fireplaces. The interior had elements of an English house in its ceiling roses and picture rails, but it was light and airy and had a calming effect on the soul. Robert directed us to the sitting room, where two women with high foreheads and immaculately set hair were drinking tea from Royal Doulton cups. "Mother, Mary, I'd like you to meet my friends," Robert said. "Miss Adela and Miss Clara Rose." If Robert had not warned me that his mother and sister were shy, I might have been intimidated by the two stiff-postured women who looked back at us. "Robert tells me that your aunt is an Indian," Mrs. Swan said. "That is right," I replied. I wondered if Mrs. Swan was about to express her disapproval and worried about how I should respond. I liked Robert and did not want to embarrass him, but I was not going to have Ranjana belittled either. Mrs. Swan surprised me when she said, "My late husband was stationed in India when we were first married. Some of my happiest memories are of Bombay." She was not comfortable with meeting new people. I could see that from the way her chin trembled when she spoke. But I was impressed by her graciousness. Mary was not dashing like her brother, but had gentle eyes. "And you are a pianist?" she said to Clara. "Robert must show you his music room." "We are on our way there now," Robert told her. "Very well. You had better hurry. Do not leave the other guests alone too long, my dear," his mother instructed him. I sensed that Mrs. Swan and Mary had shared all the conversation they felt comfortable with, and were politely dismissing us. Clara and I followed Robert down a corridor lined with paintings of thoroughbred horses until we came to a set of double doors. Robert opened them and ushered us into a space the size of an ocean liner's dining suite. In the middle of the room was a Mason and Hamlin grand piano and a harpsichord. Musical instruments from around the world hung on hooks on the walls. I recognized a few instantly: gongs, gamelans, bagpipes, and balalaikas. A long wooden flute ornately painted with a dot pattern lay on a shelf. I had seen something like it before. I remembered the documentary Dr. Parker had screened at one of our Tuesday nights. It was a didgeridoo. The main attraction in the room was not the orchestrion, which had been set up in one corner, but the pipe organ that took up an entire wall. Clara rushed towards the instrument. "Do you play?" she asked Robert. "It's my passion," he said. "It's like having a full orchestra at my fingertips." Clara stood on her tiptoes and glanced from Robert to the organ. She was longing to hear him play, but did not want to be rude by asking. "What sort of music do you like?" I asked Robert, trying another tack. He stepped up to the instrument and brushed his finger over the lower keyboard. "Anything, really. Sometimes traditional church music, and other times I lose hours playing Broadway hits." The sinews in Clara's neck were stretched taut. "You have to use your eyes, hands, feet, and ears all at once, don't you?" she asked. Robert sat on the stool. "It's like a hike, a dance, and a swim in a rough ocean made at the same time," he said. He poised his hands over the keys and began to play. Clara and I stepped back. I recognized Pachelbel's canon in D major. I had heard the pipe organ played in church before, but in Robert's music room the sound was colossal. The clamour of the party outside evaporated with each clear note. I imagined conversations coming to a stop and heads turning in the direction of the house as one by one the guests became awestruck by the music. The floor vibrated under our feet, and the tambourines, castanets, and cymbals on the walls rattled and jingled. I pictured Mrs. Swan's Royal Doulton tea set tinkling to the pulse of the music. Robert tossed his head and pressed his lips together and played with boundless energy. I was so entranced by the richness of the music that I hardly noticed Clara take my hand until she squeezed it so tightly she crushed my fingers. Robert played the final chord, then lifted his hands from the keyboard, pausing a moment before turning to face us. I was about to compliment him on his wonderful recital when a familiar voice called out, "There you are! I've been looking for you, but I only had to follow the music." I turned to see Beatrice and Philip in the doorway. Beatrice was wearing a sea-green dress with silk piping around the neckline. She looked stunning. Philip appeared relaxed in a white suit. Beatrice's engagement ring was still on her finger. Philip tried to catch my eye, but I averted my gaze. Beatrice rushed forward to kiss me and to greet Clara. "So, here is the little sister at last," she said, embracing her. "Though not so little, she's almost as tall as me." "How's Aunt Helen?" Robert asked Beatrice. Beatrice's smile faltered. "She's a little better this morning, thank you. I didn't want to leave her, but she insisted that she only needed her nurse today." Freddie arrived at the door and told us that afternoon tea had been laid out on the tables. "You're fools if you linger," he said. "It's a feast." "Better go then," said Robert with a laugh. "The cooks have been at it since yesterday." We followed Robert out onto the veranda, where long tables had been set with cucumber and watercress sandwiches, scones with jam and cream, strawberries dipped in chocolate, as well as every kind of cake imaginable. Clara lingered near Robert, fascinated by his knowledge of music. I was as astounded when I overheard him say that he was the only musical member of his family. "My father was keen on sport. The Swans have always been athletes. I'm a kind of aberration." Beatrice recognized the women from the croquet game and showed them her ring. Philip stood by her side. I took the opportunity to escape into the garden. He still loves her, I told myself, feeling the ache in my heart. I strode across the lawn behind the cypress hedge and towards the tennis courts. The further away I moved from the party, the more relieved I felt. The garden had 3 tiers. The lowest was natural bushland, but on the second was a maze. I was drawn to it out of curiosity and a desire to disappear. To find your way in and out of a maze, all you have to do is brush your fingers along the left-hand side of the hedge. Father had explained to me once when we walked through a maze at a summer party in Mielnik. I reached out and let my fingertips glide over the velvety leaves. A sense of calm fell over me as I progressed along the path, moving in lines towards the center. Statues and urns marked the pilgrimage. I arrived at the center and found a pond with carp swimming in it and a stone bench. I sat down and closed my eyes, turning my face to the sun. The throbbing in my heart quietened, and I experienced fleeting seconds of peace. I heard footsteps on the gravel and opened my eyes. "Adela?" Philip stood before me. I thought I must be dreaming and reached out to touch his sleeve to see if he was real. He had beads of sweat on his upper lip. Did people perspire in dreams? He sat down next to me. From the look in his eyes, I could have imagined that he was in love with me. I could have told myself that he had followed me through the maze at the risk of being seen because he wanted to kiss me. But I refused to believe any of these things. I did not want to be hurt again. "Adela," he said, touching my hand. I snatched it away. "Don't," I said, standing up and moving towards the pond. "You're engaged to Beatrice." "I'm going to break off our engagement," he said, following me. "Today, after Beatrice and I leave. I wanted to tell her this morning so that she wouldn't show off her ring, but she was running late and it couldn't be helped." "Beatrice says you became lovers during the war and that she gave herself to you. But you told me that we should wait." Philip was quiet, then said, "The war. It changed everything. We were young, but we didn't know if we would be alive the next day. We did a lot of things without prudence, without thinking through the consequences properly." He looked at me and smiled. "It is better to wait, Adela, believe me. Love is sacred." He rubbed his hands. "If I had waited, things would be less complicated now with Beatrice." "You expected to marry her, I suppose. You didn't think that would change." Philip nodded sadly. "Yes, there was that, too." "Beatrice said that you grew up together," I said, "that you promised to marry her when she nearly died." Philip shook his head. "Beatrice says a lot of things, some of which aren't quite true. I've come to understand that she sees me as a warm, comfortable blanket rather than her life's partner. She's different when she's in Europe. She's more independent. She hardly writes to me when she's there. And when she does, it's no more than a page of hurried prose." A voice called out, "Philip!" We jumped back from each other before we realized that the cry came from far away. Someone was calling from the house. It was a woman's voice, but it was not Beatrice. "She will be heartbroken just the same," I said. "And your father, he adores her." "Yes, he does," said Philip, sitting down on the bench. "And Beatrice will be hurt and embarrassed, too. But after a while they will see it's for the best. Beatrice deserves someone who loves her with as much passion as I love you. Not a man who feels affection for her as a brother does for a sister." The stillness of the maze was peaceful. It was as if everything had stopped for us. Perhaps the guests had moved inside to hear Robert's orchestrion. I hoped whoever it was who had called out Philip's name had given up looking for him. "What will you do?" I asked, sitting down beside Philip. He squeezed my hand. "It will be all right, Adela. Please don't worry. Beatrice will be upset for a while, but a few months of unhappiness is better than a lifetime of lies." I pressed my head against his chest. It felt right to be with him. "Happy?" he asked me. "Yes." He leaned over and kissed me. I ran my fingers through his hair. "Philip!" The voice we had heard earlier called again, only this time it was closer and more urgent. "Philip!" Another voice joined in with the first, and then another. It sounded as though several people were looking for him. Philip stood up and reached out his hand to me, helping me up. He brushed his fingers under my chin and kissed me again. "I'd better go," he said. "It won't be right to be seen together until Beatrice has been told." Before leaving the maze, Philip turned to me once more and smiled. "It's all going to be fine, Adela. Don't worry." "Promise?" "I promise." I watched Philip disappear behind the hedge. A few minutes later, the voices that had been calling greeted him. "Come quickly to the house," one of them said. I sat back down on the bench and fixed my hair. Philip was right. We were not trying to hurt anybody. We only wanted to be honest and to do what was right. I stood up and walked through the maze, drunk with happiness, desire, and sunshine. I stepped back out onto the path and gave a start when I saw Freddie waiting by the cypress pines, smoking a cigarette. He looked at me with appraising eyes. All the guests are leaving. I'm taking you and Clara home." "Leaving?" I asked, wondering why he was staring at me so harshly. Did he know I had been in the maze with Philip? "But it is still early." Freddie did not answer. I realized the strap of my slip was showing under my sleeve, and I tugged it back over my shoulder. "What has happened?" I asked. Freddie threw his cigarette on the gravel and stamped it out. "A message came from the Fay house. Beatrice's mother has died. Beatrice went home half an hour ago. Philip's just left to join her." Chapter 14. Mrs. Fay's funeral rekindled my grief at my own mother's death. I was hesitant to take Clara with me, but she insisted. I was glad in the end she came, because when we arrived at the church, the number of mourners was overwhelming. The Fay family might have been small, but they had many friends. Mrs. Fay's coffin was lifted from the horse-drawn hearse and carried into the church by the pallbearers, Philip and his father, Robert and Alfred. Beatrice stood at the entrance to the church looking dazed. Florence put her arm around her. When the coffin passed and I saw Mummy on the ribbon of the wreath, I almost broke down. I knew how losing a mother changed you. My life was divided into two parts, life with Mother and life without. The mourners followed the coffin into the church. Beatrice stumbled, and I stretched forward to help Florence hold her upright. "Thank you," Beatrice said, her tears spilling onto my hand. There was no color in her face, and her red eyebrows stood out as if they were floating in the air by themselves. In the church, I bowed my head and prayed for guidance. I had not spoken to Philip since the afternoon tea, but I trusted in his promise that he would find the best course for us. I knew that he had not told Beatrice yet because of the changed circumstances, and accepted I would have to be patient a while longer in order to do the right thing by Beatrice. Outside the church, Clara and I waited with the mourners to give Beatrice our condolences. She was sitting in a chair with Philip and Florence by her side. "I'm so sorry, Beatrice," I told her. She looked at me with tear-stained eyes. "I know you understand what I'm feeling." "I do," I said, patting her hand. "It was good of you to come," Florence said, "to give us support. Beatrice is fond of you, Adela. She thinks of you as a sister." "Oh, dear Auntie, I do," Beatrice said. Her lips trembled like an old woman's. "That's exactly how I think of Adela. I've only known her a short time, but I would trust her with my life." I could not look at Philip when Beatrice said those words. I kissed her cheek and moved on to let the next mourner greet the family. Clara must have sensed what I was thinking. She grabbed my arm and squeezed it. "I feel like a thief about to rob a helpless victim," I told Clara when we were out of earshot. "Beatrice is not helpless," said Clara. "It is only unfortunate timing. Everything will be all right." Afterwards, at the wake, Philip and I snatched a moment away from the others in the hall when I was heading towards the lavatory and he was rushing to the kitchen to request more hot water for the tea. "Are you all right?" he asked me. I nodded. "And you?" He stroked his temple. "Yes, I think so. The situation is more awkward than I had anticipated. I have to help Beatrice through this time." "I understand." "I'm disappointed that I won't make the premiere of your picture. I hope you'll give me a private screening." "I will." Philip reached out to touch my cheek, then quickly pulled away. Dr. Page Sr. was standing in the doorway. "Good day, Miss Rose," Dr. Page said to me. He glanced at Philip and raised his eyebrows. "The guests are waiting for the hot water." "Excuse me, Adela," Philip said. "Thank you for your condolences to our family." They are much appreciated." He spoke formally in front of his father, but I caught the love in his eyes. The look was going to have to sustain me during our temporary separation. After Philip left, Dr. Page turned to me. "I hope you have been keeping well, Miss Rose," he said. "How is your portrait work progressing?" I told him about Frederick Rockcliffe's portrait and other recent commissions, mindful to thank him for giving me a start to my career. I felt that he was scrutinizing me, and I did not know if he had seen Philip reach for me or not. His face was stern, and I was not sure if his grim expression was caused by anger or simply by grief. After the funeral, I occupied myself by going to the cinema and meeting Hugh and Peter at the vegetarian cafe. I enlarged Freddie's portrait as he requested so he could hang it in his office. I had used the light to downplay his suit and bring to prominence his chin and brow. He looked commanding. I was keen to see his reaction to it, and at the same time I was not enthusiastic to see him after Robert's afternoon tea. I sent the portrait special delivery to the Galaxy Pictures office. It was the first time I had not delivered a portrait in person. I usually liked to see the subject's initial reaction. My 21st birthday arrived, and Ranjana baked a vanilla cake with pink icing. Mother used to make vanilla cakes for our birthdays. After a round of happy birthday, Ranjana placed a slice in front of me. It tasted exactly the same as Mother's cakes had. "Josephine sent the recipe," said Uncle Ota, handing me an envelope and a small box. "Happy birthday, Adelka." I opened the envelope and saw it contained a letter from Aunt Josephine. "Excuse me one moment," I told the others, before stepping out into the garden to read what Aunt Josephine had written. "My beautiful Adelka, it is too difficult to believe that the baby who arrived in such a hurry one summer morning is now a young woman. How I wish I could share this important birthday with you, but in a way, we are all together. Before leaving for Mariansky Lajne, I visited the bank and took these diamond earrings from your mother's jewelry collection for you. I know she would have wanted you to have them. While there, I remembered her special recipe book and went to the Blue House to see if I could find it. Indeed I did, and was thrilled when I came across her birthday cake recipe, which I then sent to Ota and your aunt. How proud your mother would have been of you. How proud I am of you. When I return to Prague, I will arrange for Dr. Holub to send some money to you. We will wire it to you from Austria, so it can't be traced." Aunt Josephine wrote about Mariansky Lajne, but did not mention Milos. She described her hotel set in the hills above the town and how Fripp was pampered by the staff. Although Aunt Josephine said nothing of it, I feared that she was not well. Why was she visiting a spa? I wished I could be there with her. I opened the box. Inside, tucked into a piece of silk, were 2 drop earrings. I admired the pretty fleur-de-lis tops and the sparkling diamonds. I shut my eyes and saw Mother wearing the earrings while she danced with Father at a Christmas ball that I had been allowed to attend when I was a child. Mother's off-the-shoulder gown had been trimmed in lace, bows, and flowers. I did not let the memory linger further than that. I did not want to think of Milos or how he was progressing in America. No doubt the fact that I was now 21 was spurring him to greater efforts to find us. The night of the premiere of the Bunyip, Philip sent me a bouquet of pastel roses, along with a card. "I'm thinking of you, darling. My love always, Philip." Beatrice was in mourning for 3 months, and it would be improper of Philip to attend festivities while they were still officially engaged. I was disappointed not to be able to share my birthday or this important milestone with the man I loved, but I did my best to rally my spirits. Uncle Ota was providing the champagne and the cocktail sandwiches at his own expense and had gone to a lot of trouble for me. Raymond Longford's feature film had already screened at the major release theatres, and there was no need to hold a premiere for a short. But Uncle Ota wanted to bolster my courage. "You've got talent," he told me. "Let's get you off to a good start." I stood by the entrance with him, greeting the guests as they arrived. There was quite a crowd, including former colleagues of Uncle Ota's from the museum, guests and past speakers from our Tuesday night gatherings, as well as the regular cinema patrons. Mr. Tilly and his wife came with Ben. Clara placed herself beside me. She looked beautiful in the blue dress she had worn for her concert. I was happy to see how far she had come since her illness. She was my stronghold now. "I didn't realize how many people we knew," she whispered to me. Robert and Freddie arrived together. Robert looked elegant, but Freddie was dressed in a yellow tuxedo with blue shoes. I remembered my promise to myself to talk to him about his dress style. Robert could not take his eyes off Clara. She looked older than her age, but was just a week shy of 14. She would not be interested in him. Other guests were waiting, so Robert and Freddie wished us the best before moving inside. "I've been looking forward to seeing your picture all week," Freddie told me. Peter arrived with Hugh, who had Giallo on his shoulder. "Giallo's been to the pictures before," Peter assured Uncle Ota. "If he poops on anything, it'll be Hugh." "Will he talk during the picture?" Clara asked with a cheeky smile. She scratched Giallo's head, which he obligingly bent towards her. "Only during intermission," Hugh replied. Uncle Ota glanced at his watch and told us to take our seats in the cinema. I saw Ranjana sneaking up the fire escape to reach the projection room without anyone seeing her. I felt sympathy for the charade she had to maintain. I had one of my own. After the audience had sung the national anthem and we had been entertained by a comedian waltzing with his pet pig, the lights lowered and my film appeared on the screen. I listened with relief to the audience sighing and laughing in the right places. Esther, who was sitting between me and Hugh, gave a start when the bunyip appeared. It was amusing, as she had fashioned the costume herself, from one of Uncle Ota's tribal masks and a blanket. "The audience is enraptured," Uncle Ota whispered. "Congratulations!" But my little effort was overshadowed by the feature film, The Blue Mountains Mystery. The cameraman, Arthur Higgins, captured the grand beauty of the setting in a way never seen before. It was as if the mountains had risen up before our eyes to dazzle us with their majesty. Afterwards, the guests mingled in the foyer while Clara played the piano with two of her classmates joining her on violin and clarinet. Hugh, who was not comfortable with crowds, left immediately after the session, and Uncle Ota, Ranjana, and Esther were occupied with the catering. I stood by the fountain and surveyed the room. I spotted Peter in the crowd, but before I could reach him, I was intercepted by Freddie. "I'd like to see what you can do with a bit of money," he said. "That wasn't a bad effort." "Thank you." Freddie scratched his head and signaled to a waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses. "I received my portrait and all the compliments that went with it. How come you didn't bring it yourself?" "I would have," I lied, "but I have been busy." The waiter brought over the tray of glasses, and Freddie took two, handing one to me. "Have you seen Philip lately?" I was taken aback by his question. I had not forgotten how he had looked at me when I had emerged from the maze. But I had done nothing wrong. Freddie could judge me all he liked. "No," I said firmly. "Beatrice is still in mourning." Freddie cocked his head. "Beatrice," he sighed. Now there is someone who has more to her than meets the eye. My curiosity was aroused. I was about to ask him what he meant when Uncle Ota signaled to me to move to the front of the room to give a speech. "I'll catch up with you later," Freddie said. But afterwards, when I looked for him, Freddie was gone, and I had lost my chance to find out more about Beatrice. 2 days after the premiere, Philip sent me a note asking me to meet him in the garden of Broughton Hall. Now it begins, I thought. Now my happiness with Philip starts. "You both deserve all the joy in the world," Clara said when I told her where I was going. The day was unusually humid. I stepped off the tram and the sun disappeared behind the clouds, and the sky threatened rain. I had dressed in a floral skirt and blouse and had curled my hair especially for the occasion. But the listless air turned my locks frizzy and my blouse stuck to my back. I reached the path to the garden, and the sky suddenly opened. Rain splattered down and splashed mud onto my shoes and stockings. I hurried past the pine trees and tropical ferns to the summer house where Philip had said he would wait. I passed a fig tree, and the summer house came into view. Philip was standing with his back to me. I was filled with such love that I forgot my clothes were soaking wet and my curls were falling into straggly ringlets around my face. Thunder cracked. A wind that came from nowhere whipped against my face. The heat dissipated from my skin and goosebumps rose on its surface. Philip turned when he heard my step behind him. His eyes were pinched and had no luster to them. The expression on his face was one of such sorrow that I instantly stiffened. "Good God," he said, tugging off his jacket and wrapping it around me. "You must be frozen." His concern for me did nothing to quell the terror rising in my heart. A man in love with a woman does not look at her that way unless he has terrible news. Scenarios raced through my mind. Beatrice had refused to break off the engagement. She had threatened suicide. Philip had realized he was in love with her, not me. "What is it?" I asked. Philip drew me to the center of the summer house, but the position gave us little protection from the rain, which blew horizontally. Tears welled in his eyes. "Beatrice is going to have a baby," he said. I swallowed, but I could not get rid of the lump in my throat. Beatrice could not be pregnant, even though Philip had just told me so. No, I refused to believe it. Nothing as awful as that could have happened to us. Philip fumbled for my hand. "Are you sure?" I asked. My father examined her. My legs turned leaden. I wanted to make for the bench to sit down, but could not move. Philip buried his face in his hands. "It's like some terrible nightmare," he said. "Until my father said that Beatrice wanted lots of babies, I wasn't sure that she wanted any. We were careful." He looked at me with tear-stained eyes. "After Guatemala Beach, well, I made excuses to Beatrice, and during her mourning I told her that it was better to abstain. But it was too late. It must have happened in that month you and I agreed not to see each other." The shock of the truth dawned on me, and the joy of a few minutes before extinguished. If Beatrice was pregnant, Philip was going to have to marry her. He had no choice. He would have to be father to her child. The future I had pictured for us rolled away like a film spinning off a reel. I shook my head. "No." Philip placed his hands on my shoulders. He was trembling. "I wanted it to be you. I wanted to have children with you." Yes, I had wanted that too, but I was not pregnant. It was Beatrice who was going to be mother to Philip's children. I moved away from him. He was not the same man. He was going to be someone else's husband. I was going to be shut out, like a tramp looking in the window of a cozy home. "Well, now she is pregnant, maybe she will settle down," I said. Philip grabbed my arm. "Don't say that. I wanted to marry you." I found myself imagining terrible things. Perhaps Beatrice would miscarry. It was still early. Or perhaps she would die in childbirth. But if any of those things happened, I should hate myself, and it would not bring happiness to Philip or me. No, the hand of fate had given us its verdict. I sank down to the floor, and Philip knelt down and put his arms around me. Tears burned the back of my throat, but I was too shocked to cry. I felt tired. I wished I could fall asleep, to have some reprieve from the torment in my heart. "What will you do?" I asked Philip. I don't think I could bear to see you with Beatrice." He shuddered and held me closer. His heart was racing. He did not answer at once, but after a few moments he stroked my hair, then said, "I will take Beatrice to London. She wanted to live in Europe, and I will work at the hospital there." He lifted my face in his hands and kissed me. I realized that he was saying goodbye. But I could not withdraw my heart now that I had given it. I would love him forever, even if I never saw him again. The rain calmed for a moment. A ray of light shone through the clouds, but disappeared when the skies grew darker still. I wished that we could be frozen in our embrace and stay that way forever. But when the day began to fade, the futility of lingering became apparent. There was no future for us now. Philip helped me to my feet. "I will never forget you, Adela." I nodded, my heart too full to answer him. I took off his jacket and held it out for him. "Keep it," he said. He turned and ran down the steps of the summer house. I watched him rush past the pond and over the bridge. Before he disappeared into the grove, he stopped and turned back to me. Then, an instant later, he was lost from my sight. I wanted to sink to my knees, but I somehow remained upright, standing in the summer house with my dreams in tatters around me. I had no home in Prague to go to, and Philip was to marry someone else. The rain fell harder, and the wind grew fiercer, blowing the droplets in my face. But I did not turn away. "Goodbye, Philip. I won't forget you either," I whispered. Chapter 15. Philip and Beatrice married and left for England a few weeks after that miserable day in the garden at Broughton Hall. As Beatrice was just out of mourning, and because she knew she was pregnant, the wedding was a small family affair, and I was relieved not to be invited. For Philip's sake, and to quell any doubts that may arise, I sent a Belgian lace tablecloth as a wedding gift. The day the ship departed, it was as if my life had been washed away, and I was left with only a faint imprint. I was sure my love for Philip would not die, but what about his for me? Would I meet him in the street one day and receive only a friendly smile or a platonic kiss? It would be better that way, and yet I could not bear to imagine it. "He will return one day," I told Clara. "His father is here, and Beatrice's aunt and uncle are too." "Don't worry about the future," she said. "Think about how you can find happiness now." Uncle Otto kept his eye on me, although I did my best to hide my broken heart. I had never told him or Ranjana about my feelings for Philip, but they had guessed. Ranjana showed her sympathy by yelling at me whenever she found me slouching about the house. Get off your posterior, young lady, and help Esther with the garden. I don't want to look at your long face." It sounded cruel, but she meant well. She did not want me to shut down and stop moving. Esther had done that, and we knew the results too well. Uncle Ota was softer. "Adela, come with me into the garden," he said to me one day. I sat next to him on the bench under the Japanese maple. "I know you're sad, and that you won't tell us why," he said. "I remember how life wounds the young." I rested my head against his shoulder. He stroked my hair and continued. "Long before I met Ranjana, there was somebody I loved very much, but circumstances were against us and we had to part." He stumbled on the word circumstances, and I was sure that he had meant to say people. I knew he was talking about Aunt Emily, but who were the people he referred to? "I'm not going to give you platitudes about time healing all wounds. It doesn't. Life leaves its scars. But it's not without its beauty and order either. I'll never forget the woman I gave my youthful heart to and lost tragically, but I am deeply happy with Ranjana. Sometimes your true companion turns up in a surprising place. Mine did. I found her on a funeral pyre." I had to smile. "You're not the scoundrel who ruined Emily's life," I thought, snuggling closer to him. I would have asked Uncle Ota about what happened all those years ago, for at that moment I sensed he was strong enough to remember it. But I was not strong enough to hear it. I was in too much pain myself to bear another's sorrow. But one day I would ask him for the story, when we were both ready. Summer passed slowly, and I did nothing more than clean the house, work in the garden, and take a few portraits. I tried not to think of Philip and Beatrice in England together. In March the following year, Freddie sent a note that he would like to see us. The last I had heard of him was the night of the premiere, and I thought it strange that Freddie should ask beforehand what day and time was convenient for us. I had assumed if he wanted to see someone, then he simply showed up. He arrived at the appointed time in a new car, an Opel Sportwagen with a red trim. He brushed off his orange suit and followed us into the house. "There is an old cinema for sale in Thirul," he told us, when we sat down in the parlor with a glass of Ranjana's lemonade. Thirul is the untapped entertainment center of the South Coast. It draws crowds in summer as a resort, and has a railway and colliery, too. It's a golden opportunity. "What are you proposing?" asked Uncle Ota. "As a representative of Galaxy Pictures, I can't be seen to be investing in the local industry," Freddie answered, with a smile in my direction. "I make a lot of money for the company, but no one becomes rich working for somebody else, do they?" Freddie looked from me to Uncle Ota. "I want you to go buy that place for me, then work the same magic you did with Tilly's cinema. If you do that, I won't just appoint you its manager, I will make you my partner." Uncle Ota was not one to turn down a challenge. I could see his mind ticking over. He had transformed Tilly's cinema into a successful business, but it had not made him wealthy. It occurred to me that he and Freddie would make a good team. Uncle Ota had the imagination and flair, Freddie had the nerve and the financial shrewdness. "All right," Uncle Ota said, "I'll look it over and tell you what I think." Freddie shook his head. "Surely you want me to inspect it before you buy it," said Uncle Ota. "What if it's a wreck? How do you know it will work?" "I don't care if it will work," Freddie answered. "I want you to go there and make it work." Uncle Ota considered the matter for a few moments before answering. "I'd have to live there with my wife and son while I was setting it up," he said. "I'll pay your rent," said Freddie, rising from his chair. "Think about it and give me a call tomorrow morning. Before 10. I showed Freddie to the door. "Good afternoon, Adela," he said, taking his coat and hat from me. "I'm still receiving compliments on the portrait you took." "I'm glad," I said. "Do you like jazz?" he asked. "I don't know. I haven't listened to it much." Freddie raised his eyebrows. "What century are you living in? There are a couple of good places in this city. I'll take you there sometime. Bring Clara and Robert, and Esther if she wants to come too. Then you and I can discuss that funny little film of yours." Freddie honked the horn of his sport wagon before pulling out from the curb. Our neighbors looked out their windows to see what was going on. The McManus children from 2 doors away chased the car down the street. I smiled. Freddie was abrasive, but he had cheered me up too. His social and business personas were the same, pushy. But I had a sense that he did things other people were afraid to do, and I admired him for that. I returned to the parlor to find Uncle Ota making notes on the borders of the newspaper. "So, you will move to the South Coast?" I asked him. "I'll talk to Ranjana about it," he said. Then, looking at me, he smiled. "Would you like to come too?" "Why are you refusing to go?" Clara asked me when she heard about Freddie's offer. "You need a change from Sydney for a while." "Who is going to look after you?" I said. "I am 14 years old, Adelka, and Esther is here. We can come down on the weekends. Thirul is not so far away." She was right, but Uncle Ota had received word from Dr. Holub that Milos had returned to Prague. He had married Pani Benyova. Uncle Ota thought that meant that they had given up on pursuing us. But he had never seen Pani Benyova's covetous eyes, as Mother had described them in her letter to Aunt Josephine. Nor had he been witness to her single-minded ambition as I had. I could not believe she had married Milos without being sure that she would one day reside in our townhouse and country manor. No, she must be more confident than ever of gaining them. But why? "Adelka, you could take photographs of the seaside towns," Clara said, waking me from my dream. "I have heard the coast is ruggedly beautiful." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I am not leaving you." Clara's jaw set, the way it used to as a child when she was determined to get her way. But her calm voice was that of an adult. "Philip is in London studying to be a children's doctor. Beatrice is his wife. What about your dreams, Adelka? I am not going to let you waste your life over things you can't change. I am not going to watch you despair until you end up in hospital like I did." Beatrice had once described me as her friend, but we could never have shared the bond I had with Clara. It hurt to hear the truth, but my sister's words had been spoken with love. I would be of no use to anyone if I did not pick up my spirits again. In my present state, I could not protect her. I would have to trust Esther for that. Uncle Ota trained another manager for Tilly's Cinema and took Ranjana, Thomas, and me to Thirul with him in June. The train rattled through miles of untouched bushland. The angular rocks with ferns in the crevices, the giant gums and their massive limbs, and the cabbage tree palms were different from any forest I had seen in Europe. The dappled light and the golden flowers of the undergrowth presented a photograph worth taking at every bend in the tracks. The train burst from the bush, and we saw endless bays and undulating hills rolling out before us. Dozens of bungalows, with plumes of smoke rising from their chimneys, dotted the landscape. On the inland side, mountains towered over the train line and the fields. The book I had been reading fell from my lap. I thought of Philip. It was strange, considering the way Beatrice had treated me as though I were her bosom friend, that she had not written to me since her arrival in London, or informed me of the birth of her child. It saved me from being a hypocrite, but it was disconcerting too. I could not help but think that she knew about Philip and me. Perhaps Freddie had told her, or Philip himself. Perhaps she had simply guessed. By the time the train stopped at the station in Thirul, the weather had changed, and it was drizzling with rain. Uncle Ota pulled the directions to the house Freddie had rented for us from his pocket and squinted against the droplets slipping from his hat into his eyes. The skies opened and rain splashed down with pacific fury. There was no taxi or bus service available. We left our luggage with the station master to be collected later and walked down the sandy road in the direction of the coast. The sea was hissing and rumbling, but I could not see it. Everything was a waterfall of rain, and I was soaked through to the skin. Our shoes filled with water and squelched when we ran. We found ourselves dripping and muddy on the doorstep of a weatherboard bungalow. Uncle Ota searched for the key under a flower pot, as our landlady had instructed, and found it. We were relieved to see there was a provision of dry wood and coal in the hallway to light a fire. "We'd better get dried off," Ranjana said, hoisting Thomas on her hip. "We don't want to come down with pneumonia." The house was cozy with cottage windows and hardwood floors covered with braided rugs. A veranda with curved eaves protected it from the worst of the weather. We started the fire in the sitting room, and I noticed that we had a view out to sea. Although the rain had stopped, flashes of lightning darted across the swollen ocean. The following morning, while we were preparing breakfast, there was a knock at the door. Uncle Ota answered it to find our landlady holding a pail of milk. "It's from the dairy," she explained, passing the pail to Uncle Ota. "Mr. Rockcliffe wrote to say there was a little boy here, and that I should deliver fresh milk every morning." Uncle Ota reached into his pocket for some coins to pay the woman, but she shook her head. "It's all been fixed up." When Uncle Ota returned to the kitchen, he placed the milk on the bench and scooped out a cup for Thomas. "It's still warm," said Thomas, licking his lips. "Delicious." Ranjana picked up a cloth and wiped his mouth. "You be sure to thank Mr. Rockcliffe when you see him next." "I will," promised Thomas. After breakfast, we walked to the town to inspect the cinema. The rain had left puddles on the unfinished road, and Ranjana had to tug Thomas to stop him jumping in them. "Thomas," she scolded, "not in your best clothes." Thomas giggled. When the next puddle appeared, he did his best to jump into that too. "Well, better a boisterous boy than one who can't walk or jump at all," said Uncle Ota. "We have to count our blessings." Buggies and motorcars were pulled up in the town's streets. People scurried in and out of stores, carrying bread, potatoes, saddles, and other household and farm necessities to their vehicles. A woman cradling a baby stopped when she saw us, as did a man in an oilskin coat. At first I thought we might have stood out as city dwellers because of my bobbed hair and Uncle Ota's two-toned shoes, but I realized that they were looking at Ranjana. I shivered when I remembered that awful day when we were attacked on our way to the cinema. But the stares here were more curious than hostile, and when we said good morning, our greetings were mostly returned. "Ah, here you are," said Mr. Garrett, the real estate agent, when we walked into his office. He had been eating fried eggs and reached for his handkerchief to wipe his mouth. "I'll get the key. The cinema is down the street." He pulled a sheet of paper from the stack of files on his desk and disappeared into the back room, returning a few moments later with his coat and hat. "The cinema hasn't been used in a while, but it has a roof," he laughed, stroking his sideburns. "The old one didn't. Weather like yesterday's used to send us scurrying to get out of the place." "The School of Arts has a roof, though, doesn't it?" Uncle Ota asked. "Yes, it does," Mr. Garrett agreed. "They screen a few sessions a week, and are talking about putting in new seats. But they won't be able to compete with a purpose-built cinema like the one you want to open." "Won't that upset the committee?" asked Ranjana. Mr. Garrett was taken aback, as if he hadn't been expecting her to speak English. "Business is business," he replied, addressing his answer to Uncle Ota. "And the School of Arts doesn't have the seating capacity to fulfill the town's true picture attendance potential." When we saw the cinema, we did not know whether to laugh or gasp. It was nothing more than patched iron and weatherboard walls and a warped roof. A faded sign hung above the doorway, "The Royal Picture Palace." I thought Mr. Garrett opened the doors gingerly, afraid that if he pushed too hard, they would twist off their hinges. The interior was as dilapidated as the exterior. The matchboard and fibro walls must have made the cinema a cold place to sit in winter, and an oven to endure in summer. The air stank of a mix of salt and cow manure. The seats were planks resting on bricks. "There isn't a biograph box. You'll need to build one to pass the fire regulations," Mr. Garrett said. He sounded as if he were making a decorating suggestion rather than pointing out a major fault with the building. Uncle Ota tapped his knuckles against a pillar. The lattice ceiling shook, and we dodged the falling dust. The pillars blocked the view, and I wondered what they were doing there because there was no gallery to support. "This building has to come down," observed Uncle Ota, poking at a rust patch in the wall. He turned to Mr. Garrett. "We are going to have to start from scratch, which is a bigger investment than I was intending." Mr. Garrett lifted his chin. "But when it is done, just imagine the crowds it will attract. The profits. What do you think?" "What do I think?" replied Uncle Ota, raising his eyebrows. Two mice poked their heads out of the lattice and scampered down a wire and into a hole in the floor. Uncle Ota's face broke into a smile. "I think it might work." Uncle Ota wrote to Freddie with an estimate of what he thought building a picture palace would cost. "We have potential competition from Wollongong theatres who have made inquiries into leasing land. If we want to make a go of this, we had better get it right from the start. We should look at about 1,800 seats, with at least 300 of those in a well-appointed dress circle. If we want to maximize potential, then we need decor at least as good as you would find in Wollongong, though my suggestion is that we do better, with sprung seats and a magnificent foyer to keep up the novelty of a luxurious theatre. These people are proud. They do not want to be second to any major centre, and we can do well by catering to that. We also need the latest equipment. I have checked with suppliers, and it looks as if we will need a minimum of around £10,000. Uncle Ota grinned when he wrote in the figure. He was throwing down the gauntlet to Freddie, testing his nerve. Uncle Ota waited for a reply by mail, but instead opened the door one day to find Freddie pulling up at the gate. "Thirroul is too good a township to lose to a competitor, and if Southern Pictures build a reputation here, then other places could be conquered," Freddie said, before he had even taken off his hat to greet Ranjana and myself. Uncle Ota invited him into the sitting room. Ranjana set about making tea. "Can you obtain the capital quickly?" Uncle Ota asked.
"I've already done it," said Freddie. "I mortgaged my house. I want you to do whatever is necessary to build the best, most impressive cinema on the South Coast."
Freddie stayed for lunch. I was curious to see how he would react to eating the korma curry and lentils Ranjana had prepared, but he ploughed through his food with a voracious appetite.
"Now, Mrs. Rose," he said to Ranjana, "I want you to source the best equipment for your projection room. And I want you to stop hiding. You are a talented projectionist. Let people know who you are."
Ranjana rolled her eyes. "That's easier said than done."
"Only in one's mind," said Freddie, cutting Ranjana off. "That's the problem with black people in my country. They struggle to be second-class whites. They should use what is unique about them. White people couldn't have invented jazz."
It was the first time I had ever seen Ranjana lost for words.
"The projection room will need to be fireproofed and isolated from the rest of the cinema in case of an emergency," Freddie said, before glancing at his watch and standing up. "I'm sorry I can't stay. It's been delightful."
"No," cried out Thomas.
We turned to look at him.
"I haven't said, 'Thank you, Mr. Rockcliffe,' yet," he protested.
"What for?"
Freddie asked him. "For the milk," Thomas said.
Freddie gave him a salute. "You are welcome, young man."
He was like a storm that crashed through the sky but cleared the air. Freddie took significant risks in anticipation of large rewards. I found him inspiring. I walked Freddie to his car.
"Are you all right down here?" he asked me. "Is there anything you'd like from Sydney?"
I shook my head. "Thank you, but I have everything I need." He pursed his lips.
"Did you bring your typewriter? Are you working on something new?"
"No." Freddie did not say anything. He reached forward and brushed a leaf off his windscreen. There was a question on the tip of my tongue that I wanted to ask. I had been waiting to ask it, but had kept losing my nerve. "Freddie, have you heard from Philip and Beatrice?"
"No,"
he said. "Don't you find that strange? Clara says they haven't written to Robert either." Freddie turned to me.
"Do you know what the difference is between civilizations that survive and those that perish, Adela?"
I could not see what his question had to do with our conversation, and did not answer. Freddie started the engine.
"Civilizations that survive deal with their present and their future. Those that perish cling to their past."
Freddie sent me a wave before speeding off down the road. I bit my lip, holding back my indignant tears. I was sure now that Freddie had known I was in love with Philip and had been insensitive enough to make light of it. I would be cordial for Uncle Otter's sake, but I would never ask another thing of Freddie Rockcliffe, I promised myself. A week later, the postal truck delivered a package to me.
"It's heavy," said Uncle Otter, lifting it onto the dining table.
I cut the string and opened the package to find a new imperial typewriter inside. Freddie had not included a letter, only a poem with the writer unacknowledged. I had one dream left, one bullet in the barrel. I stared down the beast at my door, ready to pursue that dream with the desperation of someone with nothing left to lose. The poem lacked rhythm and structure, and I had a suspicion that Freddie had written it himself. But I did not laugh at it. I appreciated the sentiment. Perhaps Freddie realized he had hurt me and was sorry. He was abrupt, but he motivated people. I had given thought to what he had said about clinging to the past. I rolled a piece of paper into the typewriter and composed a thank you note.
The next day, I set up the typewriter on the dining room table and listed ideas for a script. I was ready to take some risks myself to realize my dream of making pictures. I typed the first 3 pages effortlessly, but as I was winding on the paper for the 4th page, I looked out of the window and noticed the fig tree in our neighbor's garden. I suddenly remembered Philip's face on the day we had parted in Broughton Hall's garden, and froze. Uncle Otto wasted no time setting about the construction of the Cascade Picture Palace. 2 months after he had seen the site, the old building had been demolished and the foundations for the new one put in place. While Uncle Otto consulted architects over granulite stairways and stained glass windows, Ranjana set about sourcing an Ernman cinematograph and a Crompton 10-horsepower motor converter. She had a superior knowledge of her craft compared to most projectionists, and was tired of the stairs and the second-class treatment that suppliers dealt out to her. "I am renouncing my position as a token Australian," she proclaimed one morning. She swapped her Western clothes for saris and her pearls for a bindi. But instead of the traditional cotton and silk saris, Ranjana made hers from Western fabrics. One day, when she and I had to travel to Sydney to source Axminster carpets, she donned a sari of linen patterned with giant maple leaves. The coal miners and their wives waiting on the platform could not take their eyes off her. If she had hoped to discourage people staring at her, the outfit had the opposite effect. But Ranjana, who had insisted that we buy first-class tickets, acted as if the attention was homage. She lifted her chin like an exotic Maharani leaving her place in Jaipur. Her performance worked. I expected the guard to stop us entering the carriage and to tell us that dark people were not allowed to travel first class. Instead, he dusted off our seats with his handkerchief before allowing us to sit down. "Thank you," Ranjana said like a true sovereign. Then turning to me, she whispered, "Freddie was right." I thought of the day Freddie had come to our house in Watson's Bay to have his picture taken, and how he had quoted Nietzsche. "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." Perhaps there was more to Freddie than met the eye. While the cinema was being built, we screened 3 sessions a week at the School of Arts to become familiar with our audience. The locals loved everything from serious documentaries to frivolous comedies. Thirroul truly was a potential gold mine. I missed Clara and was happy when she and Esther stayed with us on weekends. The scenery around Thirroul was breathtaking, and Clara was enamored of it. I accompanied her on walks in the bush because I wanted to spend time with her. But Clara had inherited Uncle Otto's adventurous spirit, while I was timid. "Aren't there snakes in the bush?" I asked her. The weather had turned warmer, and I had heard that snakes came out of hibernation in spring. "Plenty," Clara replied. "Tigers, browns, copperheads, and red-bellied black snakes. The tigers are the most deadly." "Doesn't that worry you?" I asked, watching her scramble up the slope ahead of me. Clara turned to face me. "They can't move faster than you or I can walk. If they sense the vibration of your footsteps approaching from a distance, they will move away. So we will proceed through the undergrowth slowly and make up for lost time on the established tracks." "And should one of us get bitten?" I asked. Clara patted the satchel she wore on her hip alongside her water bottle and compass. "We will cauterize the wound and apply a tourniquet." "How do you know so much about snakes?" I asked her. "Robert told me. He had a pet diamond python when he was a child and is fascinated by reptiles." "Robert Swan? Where did you see him?"
He is a patron of the Conservatorium of Music and occasionally comes to the high school's performances too. He and Freddie took Esther and me to see a jazz band. I stopped in my tracks. Robert seemed a decent young man, but Clara was 15 and still at school. But Clara had said that Esther had accompanied her when she went out with Robert and Freddie, so I did not believe they were trying to lead her astray. "Do you like Robert?" I asked. Clara glanced at her feet. "I am not sure," she said. "I enjoy talking with him so much that I never want our conversations to end. He knows a lot about so many things, and he is passionate about music." She is in love with him, I thought. It would have been foolish not to see how well suited Clara and Robert were to each other. But since she had been born, it had always been her and me. I was not prepared for Clara to share her secrets with someone else. Perhaps I wanted her to remain a child. But that was ridiculous. One day she would marry and have children of her own, as I had hoped to do with Philip. But I did not want to think of those things now. I changed the subject to the shape of the clouds floating overhead. "That is definitely a sailboat," I said, indicating a cumulus cloud. "No," said Clara. "I see a set of scales." One day Clara and I were taking our morning walk and had progressed a short way along the path when Clara stopped and pointed at something. My gaze followed the line from her finger to the branch she was looking at. I heard the familiar "cook-cook-cook" call of the kookaburra before I saw it. We had a shared fascination for the squat birds with the mask over their eyes. There was a family of them that sat on our washing line in Watson's Bay in the early evenings. The kookaburra swooped to another branch, and we continued on our way, Clara a short distance ahead of me. She pushed aside a fern with her walking stick, then dropped to her knees in the leaf litter. Thinking that my worst fears had come to pass and she had been bitten by a snake, I rushed towards her. But there was no snake. Clara was running her fingers through the fur of an animal, about the size of a cat, lying on its side. There was a wound to the head near the ear, and a trickle of blood oozing from its mouth. "It's a possum," Clara said, turning the animal over. From that angle I could see that the creature had a pretty face with eyes framed by coal-like markings. "They shoot them for their fur," she said, studying the gum tree above us. "This one must have fallen where they couldn't find it." I touched the possum's fur. It was soft and dense and would be appealing to coat makers. The body was cold, but not stiff. It must have been killed at dawn. The death of the possum affected us, and we remained silent until something in its stomach moved. My first thought was maggots, and I was appalled when Clara pushed her fingers into the white belly fur. 2 skinny legs with clawed feet appeared, then disappeared again. Clara lifted a flap of skin and eased something out. I remembered that some Australian animals had pouches. "It's a female, and she has a joey," Clara said. The creature that appeared in her hand looked nothing like its mother. The eyes were still closed, and it had a head like a bald puppy. Its ribs were showing through its fragile skin. "It is still warm," she said, holding the creature towards me. "You take it. Your skin is warmer than mine." I tugged the cotton scarf from around my neck and formed it into a truss. Clara placed the animal in it, and I tucked it down the front of my blouse, securing the ends of the strap to my camisole, and holding the animal against my chest. I felt it wriggle, then settle against my flesh. "It is so small and has hardly any fur. Will it live without its mother?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "Let's see what Uncle Otter says." She gathered up her satchel, and we picked up our sticks before running in the direction of home. Uncle Otter examined the joey and pointed to a slit in its tummy. "It's a girl. See?
She's already got a tiny pouch of her own."
Ranjana appeared with one of Thomas's woolen caps. "Shall we wrap her in this? It looks like a pouch." Thomas was proud that his hat was being employed in the Joey's cause and watched me tuck the scarf and possum into the pouch before placing them on a warm water bottle in a small hat box provided by Esther with holes in the lid. "What are we going to feed it?" he asked. Uncle Ota averted his gaze. He was thinking the same thing I was, that the unformed creature was not going to live more than a few hours. But I could still feel the tingle on my skin where the Joey had lain against me, and prayed that she would. Ranjana had taken to the Joey as much as Thomas had, and was full of suggestions. "They give orphaned kittens carnation milk and vitamin drops," she said. "Perhaps we can try that. And egg yolk might be good." Uncle Ota looked as if he was wrestling with his conscience, but something made him decide to get into the spirit of things. "All right," he said, sitting up. "What shall we call our little orphan?" "Angel,"
Thomas replied. "Angel is a good name," agreed Esther. "We all need an angel."
Ranjana rummaged through the cupboards and found a can of carnation milk. She pierced it, adding some vitamin drops, and poured the creamy mixture into a jug, diluting it with warm water from the kettle before handing the mixture to me.
"Indeed, we all need an angel sometimes," said Uncle Ota, giving me a knowing smile. "Now, let's hope our little one lives."
Chapter 16. Opening night for the Cascade Picture Palace was set for the 18th of December. The auditorium had been built with a sloping floor so that every seat had an unhampered view. There was a dress circle finished in Russian red with gold trimmings and chandeliers that could be dimmed or brightened on demand. But when the beginning of the month came around, there were many jobs still uncompleted. The columns of the proscenium were not finished, and only half the fresco had been painted. We had plasterers and painters working day and night. The stage was designed so that it could be converted from a film screen to a traditional platform for cabaret acts, but the mechanism for closing the curtain jammed when it was halfway down. Freddie sent technicians from Sydney to iron out the glitches. I was supervising them one morning when Uncle Ota rushed into the auditorium and called out my name. "I am over here," I answered from the second row of seats. Uncle Ota shook his head. "I am going deaf with all the noise. Come with me. I need to speak to you about the program for opening night." I stepped over the canvas that had been laid across the floor to protect it. "I will be back here in half an hour," I told him. "I have to go home to feed Angel."
"Ah, Angel," said Uncle Ota with a smile and a nod. "Of course."
The first night we had Angel, Clara and I did not sleep. Her cries for her mother were pitiful, and we had to change the water bottle every 3 hours to keep her warm. Clara and Esther returned to Sydney on Sunday afternoon, and Angel was left in my care. Despite my efforts to encourage her to eat, she would not take any food. Her weight dropped 1/2 ounce. By the 3rd day, it was clear from her labored breathing that Angel was ailing.
"The little thing is like an orphaned child," lamented Ranjana. "She wants the smell of her mother." "Her mouth opening is not very wide," Uncle Ota observed, "and she can probably only drink small amounts at a time."
Ranjana found a baby bottle and some teats that had belonged to Thomas. She took a fine piece of rubber tubing and pushed it into the opening of the teat. I tested the temperature of the milk mixture and gently inserted the tube into Angel's mouth. She began to drink. I fed her every 2 hours through the day and night for the next week.
Ranjana offered to help, but Angel would not accept food from her, nor even from Clara, who came down the following weekend. As the baby possum began to put on weight, I took on the glowing but disheveled look of a new mother. "It's just like when I had Tommy," Ranjana laughed. I toileted Angel and rubbed her body with a dab of lanolin. One day when I opened the pouch, I found her gazing back at me with shining eyes. In the moment the little creature looked at me, my relationship with nature changed. I had always loved the beauty of trees and forests, but I became interested in all the lives around me, no matter how small. The magpie on its nest, the kangaroo grazing at the edge of the bush, the fish that kissed my legs when I waded in the shallows. I felt a sense of lightness and ease that I had not experienced in months. Happiness bubbled up inside me when I came across another living creature. Even when I found a brown snake sleeping in the woodshed, I did not ask our landlady's husband to kill it, as I might have done in the past. I shut the door loosely and put a note on the handle: "Snake in residence." The Buddhists have a saying that whenever you help another living being to thrive, you will find that the real healing has taken place in yourself, Clara told me. I thought about Clara's words when I fed Angel her first solid food, the new tips of gum leaves. I tickled her ears. The other brush-tail possums I had seen walking along the fence at night had pointed ears, but one of Angel's ears was flat. It was her special quirk. Clara finished school for the year, and she and Esther stayed for the holidays, so Clara could rehearse with the cinema orchestra for opening night. Hugh, Giallo, and Peter arrived from Sydney on the train the day before the event. Uncle Ota and I met them at the station. "The ticket collector wasn't going to let us on the train with our feathered friend here," said Peter, pointing to Giallo. "We almost didn't make it." "Oh, silly people," I said, putting my finger out so Giallo could shake hands with me using his claw. "That's all right," said Hugh. "I played the crippled soldier. I lost a leg for this country. I reckon they can let me ride a train with my bird." Hugh sounded bitter. I decided to introduce him to Freddie. They had met briefly at my premiere, but Hugh had not stayed for the party. Ranjana and Freddie were instant cures for self-pity. Ranjana would kick you in the pants, and Freddie would walk right over you if you did not get up soon enough. When we arrived at the house, we found Esther had baked an orange cake for our guests. She was wearing the emerald green dress she kept for formal occasions. She placed the cake on the dining table and went about setting out the teapot and cups and saucers with care. She served everyone, but made a special point of asking Hugh how he liked his tea. "Sugar for sweetness? Milk to make it smooth?" She held the jug over one of the rose-patterned china cups we saved for special occasions. "Just milk, thank you," Hugh said, without looking at her. Esther was not perturbed by his aloof manner. She moved to Uncle Ota's gramophone and dropped the needle. Un bel di vedremo from Puccini's Madame Butterfly filled the room. She knows how he likes his tea, I thought. Esther had made a cup for Hugh almost every hour when we were working on the bunyip. He asked her to stop because he was going to the toilet all the time. I glanced at Clara. She shrugged her shoulders, not able to understand Esther's diligent attention to Hugh either. On the night of the premiere, I weighed Angel. She had tripled her weight and was covered in dense fuzz. Clara and Thomas clapped their hands with delight. "She looks like a pom-pom," observed Thomas, stroking Angel's fur when I held her out to him. I pinned her pouch to the side of a parrot cage and left her to munch on the grevillea blossoms Thomas had collected with Clara. The whole town turned up for the opening of the Cascade Picture Palace.
I was proud when I heard the guests chattering in the auditorium before the show. The excitement in the air was palpable. As well as Beaumont Smith's picture, The Prehistoric Hayseeds, there were chorus lines, comedians, and an opera singer on the program. The local beauty queen cut the ribbon, and the president of Bully Shire Council gave a speech commending us on building a cinema in Thirroul. Clara, beautiful in a saffron yellow dress encrusted with sequins, performed Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1. Robert, who had come to the premiere, could not take his eyes off her. At the party afterwards, we lowered the lights, and a dance band played in the foyer. I knew that Freddie was coming, but I had not seen him all evening. I was making my way past the dance floor when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to see a well-built man with dark hair standing behind me. I assumed that he wanted to dance. In a strange way, I felt it would be disloyal to Philip to dance with another man, but the gentleman was a guest. He was dressed in a formal evening suit with a white tie and textured silk lapels. I took the hand he offered to guide me to the dance floor and caught a glimpse of the smart braid-covered buttons of his jacket. "You look swell," the man said, leading me into the light of the dance floor. I recognized the voice and blinked. "Freddie?" "Yeah, what?" he said. "Your suit." He glanced down at his jacket. "Clara chose it for me. You know, I wanted to blend in a bit. I have to play it low-key. There are a couple of people from Galaxy Pictures here, and I don't want them knowing I own the place." "You look nice," I told him. The band started up a foxtrot, and Freddie led me around the floor. His hold was a touch too firm, but he was a big man, and I barely reached his chest, so we had a strength disparity anyway. We glided past couples, and I thought of Beatrice and Philip. "So, what have you been doing down here? Any writing?" Freddie asked me. "I have tried," I said, "but nothing comes out." "Maybe you're trying too hard. The bunyip idea worked. You need to take a story like that and make it longer." I did not want to tell Freddie that I was finding it difficult to write because I was thinking about Philip. But somehow he saw through me. "I know you were in love with Philip Page, but Beatrice had the claim on him, and that's the past now," he said. I was astounded by his brazenness. "You don't mince words. Mincing words is a waste of time. If you respect someone, you tell them the truth." The shock of the truth in what Freddie said unsettled me. Clara had said the same thing, and Uncle Ota had hinted at it. They were all right. If I was to move forward, I had to put Philip behind me. But whenever I thought of him, I wanted to hold on to the memory a little longer, and that was what was keeping me trapped. "I thought you didn't approve," I said, "of Philip and me." Freddie's brow wrinkled. "I was jealous. Philip was lucky." The band played a quick-step, and Freddie spun me around. Perhaps he thought Philip was lucky to have had 2 women in love with him. I remembered Robert saying once that Freddie was lonely. His parents had passed away, and his only family was an old aunt who lived in New York. "What have you been doing if you haven't been writing?" Freddie asked when the band took a break. "Taking photographs?" Apart from helping Uncle Ota with the cinema and bushwalking with Clara, I had not done much at all. I told him about Angel and how Clara and I had saved her life. "That's nice," said Freddie, leading me off the dance floor. "You raised a possum. Are you going to make it into a collar or something?" After believing that Freddie might be more sensitive than he appeared, my hopes were dashed. The suit has changed, but not the man, I thought. I awoke the next morning with an idea for a film and jotted down the seeds of the story before getting out of bed. My conversation with Freddie had sparked something, because every morning after that when I woke up, I knew what was going to happen in the next scene I had to write. The story was about a society girl engaged to a wealthy man. They have an argument one day, and to make amends, the man takes the woman shopping and tells her that she can have anything she wants. She decides on a coat made of possum fur. But each time the woman wears the coat, she is struck by bad luck. She wants to show off her coat to her girlfriends at a restaurant, but is stung by a bee on the eyelid before she leaves home. She wears it to visit her parents, and her father chokes, nearly fatally, on a pea. She wears the coat to a society function, and her fiancé trips and breaks his ankle. The woman, however, cannot see that her bad luck is related to the purchase of the coat. After breakfast, I typed out the scene I had imagined in the morning. As the script grew, I reviewed the pages with a sense of excitement. I wanted to know what would happen next. The couple's wedding is to take place in a church on the south coast, but the woman wears the coat to the rehearsal, and the church burns down. At a party in the couple's honor, the woman overhears a young man, a friend of her father's, tell another guest that the possum is known in Aboriginal legends as a curious, sometimes mischievous, but always kind animal. He jokes that these are not traits of the woman, who was rude to him on a previous occasion. She's wearing the wrong coat. She should be wearing skunk. When I reached the end of the story, however, I became stuck. Then one evening when I was feeding Angel gum leaves and pieces of apple, an idea came to me. I scribbled it down in the margins of the newspaper I used to line her cage. While driving home one evening, the woman's fiancé, drunk and cantankerous, hits a possum on the road. He wants to drive on, but the woman, burned by what she overheard about herself, insists that they stop to check whether it is alive or dead. The possum is still alive and has a joey in her pouch. The fiancé suggests that they run over the possum again, but the woman says that she might just be in shock. She wraps the possum in the only warm thing she has, the coat, and takes her home. While holding the possum in her lap, the woman runs her fingers through the animal's fur and then looks at her coat. It dawns on her what it is made of. The next morning, the possum is alert. She was only suffering concussion. And at dusk, the woman takes her to the forest near where they found her and lets her go. The woman realizes her coat has blood on it, but rather than get it cleaned, she buries it. Then she tells her fiancé that their engagement is off. She finds the young man from the party of the previous night and tells him that she did not like what he said about her, but he was right. The man looks at her differently, and the audience is left with the impression of a possible relationship for them in the future. Clara was the first person to read the script. "The sense of magic reminds me of Prague," she said, "but the story feels Australian, too." I sent it to Hugh, knowing that if there was a fault with the script, he would have no qualms about pointing it out. "The story never lags, which is important," he wrote in reply. "But it is a fantasy and bittersweet. Australian audiences usually want realism and a straightforward ending. But that does not mean you cannot take a chance. It only means that you will have to find a producer willing to take that chance with you. In terms of the camera work, this picture could be visually stunning. But we cannot use leftover stock for this one, Adela. You're going to need to raise about £3,000. Hugh was right. Most Australian films were about station life and bushrangers. There might not be an audience for my picture, and £3,000 was a lot of money. From my photography work, I managed to keep Clara and myself. The funds Aunt Josephine had sent amounted to £1,000, and I wanted to save the money for emergencies that might arise. I was not going to be able to make the picture without investors.
I was hesitant to approach Freddie because the subject matter would go over his head, and I needed a producer who could sympathize with my vision. Uncle Ota gave me the idea of approaching local businesses to see if they would invest in return for advertising. But it was obvious from the polite smiles and the offers of cups of tea I received that none of the businessmen I met with took me seriously. The most I was offered was £200 and an invitation to dinner. Part of me wanted to retreat and to have Uncle Ota or Hugh stand in my place when asking for money. But Aunt Josephine had instilled in me the belief that women were capable of anything, as long as they had faith in themselves. So I had faith, but it still did not bring me any money. Half a year passed before I progressed further with the script. The Cascade Picture Palace was turning into a successful venture, and Uncle Ota planned to put a manager in charge of the cinema and move to Balgownie to create another picture palace there with Freddie's backing. Ranjana and Thomas would go with him. It was time for me to return to Sydney to be with Clara. She was entering her senior years at the Conservatorium High School and needed my support. Esther had proved a dedicated chaperone to Clara, but it was clear to me that my sister's feelings for Robert had become serious. She spoke with undisguised enthusiasm about all the things they did together: attending lectures at the Theosophical Society, sketching the bowerbirds in Robert's garden, rowing boats in the National Park. I could not leave Esther in charge of my sister forever. Clara was blossoming into a lovely woman, but she could be willful too, and I wanted to make sure nothing distracted her from her studies. In truth, I was also jealous. As Robert and Clara's mutual adoration grew, I felt my own part in my sister's life diminishing, and I wanted to be at the center of it again. I had not been successful in attracting investors for my picture and was on the verge of giving up on the idea when I saw a film that was to change everything. On my last night in Thirul, Uncle Ota screened Fritz Lang's Siegfried. My breath was taken away by the retelling of the Nordic fable. It was simply too beautiful for words. I lay awake that night remembering the magnificent sets and costumes. A picture like that would cost more than £3,000. I rolled over and turned on the light. Perhaps I had set my sights too low. But there was only one person I could go to who I knew could provide the kind of finance I needed to make my film into a masterpiece: Freddie. The following day I returned to Sydney with Angel in a cat basket. We had become inseparable. I looked forward to dusk when she woke up to munch the native leaves and blossoms Thomas and I collected. When she was a baby, she would climb out of her cage and sit on my back, as if I were her wild mother. But once she emerged from her pouch and moved into the hollow branch I had hung in her cage, she began to outgrow her home. At Esther's house, Clara and I put Angel in an aviary in our room, with some branches for her to climb and a hat box with a hole cut in it for her to sleep inside. I left the door open at night so she was free to wander the house. But in the morning there would be broken dishes on the floor and droppings on the carpet. No one complained about cleaning up after her because we all loved Angel, but she was a wild animal, not a cat that could be house-trained. The unsuitability of keeping her as a pet was dawning on us. To curb some of her habits, I tied a rope from the end of my bed through the window and out to a tree in the back garden. In this way, Angel could wander from the bedroom to sit in the tree to eat her fruit and do her droppings. For the first 3 nights, we found Angel back and asleep in her hat box in the morning. But after the 4th night, she did not return. Clara and I searched nearby gardens and parks for her. We left corn out at night and found in the morning that it had been nibbled, but whether the raider had been Angel or another possum or a flying fox, we did not know. "You will see her again," Clara reassured me. "She has probably found some other possums to play with."
Each night I looked out my window in vain. There was no sign of our angel. "What if a cat has caught her?" I lamented, "or a dog?" I shuddered when I remembered that greyhound trainers used possums as bait. "Angel was born to be wild," Uncle Ota wrote to me. "She has gone to do what is natural to her. She will be there somewhere around. You will see." I tried to take comfort in his words, but I felt the loss of my animal friend. The empty space left by Angel motivated me to send my script to Freddie. He replied by telegram, "Come straight away." I was ready to throw myself into work. Chapter 17. Hugh and I went to see Freddie at his home in Cremorne. He did not bring Giallo. He would compete for attention, he said. We entered Freddie's driveway and found ourselves on an estate that was the opposite in every way to the shade-dappled gardens and genteel features of the houses around it. Freddie's house was a 2-story mansion with a bell-cast roof and Moorish arched windows, minarets and towers. It might have been attractive if it was softened by a leafy garden, but it stood solitary in the middle of an expanse of lawn. Perhaps the architect had advised Freddie that it would appear imposing that way, but it looked like a mausoleum. The atmosphere of domination extended to the parterre garden. The trees and shrubs had been sculptured into cones, corkscrews, and pyramids. No plant had been left untouched. It was as if Freddie thought that the flowing shapes of nature should be subjugated. The garden was lifeless too. There was not a bird to be seen anywhere. I hesitated at the door and glanced back at the garden. Was Freddie the right person to produce a film about nature? I sighed. What choice did I have? I nodded to Hugh, who turned the ringer. A maid with a long nose and black hair greeted us at the door. "Mr. Rockcliffe is in his study," she said in a Spanish accent. "Come this way, please." We followed her down a hallway with a Gobelin tapestry on one wall and a suit of armor against the other. The maid knocked on a door and opened it. "Mr. Rockcliffe, your visitors are here." "Come in," said Freddie, rising from his desk. I walked into the room and stopped in my tracks. Freddie was wearing a blue checked suit with a mustard-colored shirt, but that was not what shocked me. Spread-eagled on the floor was a polar bear skin. I had seen tiger, zebra, and wolf skins in the houses of people I had photographed, but I had never seen a pelt like this one. The head was still intact, and the mournful glass eyes stared at me. A rope was twisted around the animal's muzzle and extended to its outstretched paws, as if it had just been trapped and was looking death in the face. "Christ," muttered Hugh when he came in behind me. "You like it?" asked Freddie, signaling to his maid to prepare tea. "The first director I made a film with gave it to me." A fire burned in the fireplace, and the room was stiflingly hot. It had been cold outside, but now my head boiled under my cloche hat. I patted my neck with my handkerchief. "Please, sit down," Freddie said, indicating 2 wing-backed chairs. Hugh and I edged our way around the rug, not able to bring ourselves to step on that unfortunate animal. The maid brought the tea. I was glad for the excuse to look at my cup instead of the rug or Freddie's suit. Maybe he does these things on purpose, I told myself, to unsettle people. Freddie sat back in his chair and folded his hands behind his head. "I've read your script, Adela," he said, "and boy, do you have some work to do. It's full of flaws." "What flaws?"
I asked. Well, to start with, the assumption that people might care about a possum the same way they care about a dog. Don't you know that Australians slaughtered 5 million possums last trapping season? Why the hell should they care if one of them gets hit by a car, or if a dozen of them are turned into a coat for some society lady to wear? I knew possums were hunted for their fur, but the number that were being slaughtered left me speechless. I thought of Angel's innocent eyes. She was more beautiful than any dog or cat. How could people kill animals like her? What about a native bear, then? Hugh suggested. People seem to like them. Freddie scratched his chin. One of Australia's national symbols. Just as many of them are killed in a season. I think you two have been hanging around the vegetarian cafe too long. Children might think those animals are cute, but their parents couldn't care less. He waved a box of cigars in front of Hugh, who declined, and took one himself. I was on the verge of tears. My script did not have a flaw. The whole premise was wrong. I stared at the rope around the polar bear's muzzle. I did not blame Freddie. He was only speaking the truth. Who was going to take a story about a possum seriously? I lived in a much kinder world with Uncle Ota, Ranjana, and Clara. Even my burly cameraman would not hurt a lamb, let alone eat one. But why did Freddie call us here if he was only going to scoff at the script? If the story is so out of touch with what people think, why did you want to see us? I asked him. Are you trying to humiliate us? Freddie's eyes opened with surprise. Why? He asked. Because this is so different from the pictures that are being produced here. It's refreshing. I'm excited about it. And believe me, that's rare. I was too stunned to take in immediately what Freddie had said. A moment ago, I had been ready to leave. He laughed and shook his head. You artists are all the same. Too sensitive. I tell you there are flaws in your script, and you think I'm saying the whole thing is trash. What you need to do is get your idea across not to other nature-minded people like yourself, but to kangaroo-shooting, meat-eating, leather-wearing men like me. You find a joey in a pouch, you save it. I find one in an animal I've shot, and I toss it in the bush to die. You have to stand in my shoes and make me see things differently. You haven't achieved that yet with this draft. I didn't shed a tear. I saw my relationship to Freddie in a different light. He ruffled my feathers, but it made me stronger. What do you suggest? I asked him. I was ready to do whatever it took to make my script work. I knew that if I did not listen to Freddie's advice, the picture, even if made, would be ridiculed and forgotten. Freddie took a puff of his cigar and blew a smoke ring in the air before answering. What you have to do is make your main character see the world as most people do. Then have something happen that changes that perception. Why should she care about some animal's life when she has concerns enough in her own? What's important to her is how she looks and how she is perceived. Is she fashionable enough? If millions of animals are being killed each day, what does it matter if she harms just one? I tried to put myself in the position that Freddie was describing. I had been a vegetarian for so many years now that it was difficult for me to see the moral difference between killing an animal and killing a person. But church ministers, loving mothers, policemen, and school teachers killed and ate animals every day. It was the heartstrings of the indifferent I had to reach, and I was not sure how I could do that. You need to plot nature calling out to this heroine long before the possum gets hit, Freddie explained. Perhaps she goes on a hunt with her friends and sees a mother fox and her cubs ripped apart by dogs. Maybe she has to turn away, or feels compelled to look. You have to plant these things from the beginning of the story. When Freddie saw that I was absorbing his words, he turned to the next flaw in the script. "Why does the story have to be set on the South Coast?" he asked Hugh. "The scenery's lush," Hugh said. "The way this picture will look is important." I suddenly was not sure why it had to be set down south, apart from the fact that I was living there when I wrote the script. No more lush than you'll find in Ku-ring-gai Chase, which is closer. If we go south, we'll have to accommodate the whole cast there, and if they work in the theater, we'll have to pay them for missing a season. If we film in Sydney, they can still work at the theater in the evenings. "Yeah, that's true," Hugh said. It was my turn next. "Adela, you mentioned in your letter that it would be necessary to use Waverley Film Studios for the indoor sets. Was there any particular reason?" I had never forgotten the premiere of The Ghost of Spooky Hill, and the way the curtains on the set constantly moved in the breeze, and how the actor's hair became more windblown as a scene progressed. "I don't want to shoot interior scenes on an exterior set," I said, "even if it means we have to pay for Klieg lights." "Wanting Klieg lights is understandable," said Freddie. "After all, if we want to get this film sold overseas, we can't have the technical standards laughed at. But why do we have to build sets in a studio? Surely, if it's a socialite's house we're trying to evoke, we can find someone to lend us their home for the day in return for a location fee. Why don't I ask Robert if we can use his place?" I was exhausted, but I was excited too. In the Dark was not going to be some 2-bit production. Hugh actually smiled when Freddie told him that we were going to buy a new Bell and Howell camera. "Thank you," I said to Freddie when the meeting was over. "I am looking forward to working with you." I was surprised to find that I meant it. He pointed to the scarf around my neck. "Beautiful fabric. Silk?" "Yes," I answered, fingering the scarf Mother had given me. "Silk, indeed," said Freddie, an amused expression on his face. "Any idea how it's made?" I had thought my hard work was over when I had finished my script, but it was only beginning. To find the answer to Freddie's question about my scarf, I asked Uncle Ota how silk was made, and was appalled to learn that silkworms were boiled alive to obtain minute amounts of cloth. It was something of a shock to me to realize that I could be just as indifferent and uncaring about another creature's suffering as people who ate meat. How could I judge them when I found myself justifying that silkworms were only insects that did not feel anything, and if they were not killed for silk, they would be eaten by birds anyway? But inside I knew I was making rationalizations to defend one thing. I did not want to give up my beautiful scarf. I looked pretty in it. Freddie, in his perceptive way, had given me an insight into how women justified their fur coats. A picture that did not touch people's hearts was a pointless one to make. Freddie told Robert what I was doing, and he invited me to meet a friend of his mother's who had formed a group to discourage women from buying hats with lyrebird feathers. "When I was growing up, those beautiful birds were everywhere," the woman told me. "My grandchildren may never see one." The woman gave me the idea of questioning the other patrons at the vegetarian cafe. What motivations did they have for not harming animals? "Why did you stop eating meat?" I asked. Many of them said it was because they believed eating flesh caused all sorts of diseases. Most, however, spoke of the rights of animals. One man told me that he grew up on a farm where he'd had a pet piglet. When the pig became a sow, she was sent off to the butcher. Molly looked into my eyes when they loaded her on the cart. She knew what was going to happen to her. I had betrayed my childhood friend. I spent hours in the State Library, poring over parliamentary notes on the bills that had been passed to protect wildlife, and the arguments against them. I entertained no sort of doubt that instead of bringing in a bill to protect native animals, it would have been far better in the interests of the settlers generally to bring in a bill to exterminate the whole lot of them. The farmers of the coastal districts where I had found Angel demanded that possums be systematically eradicated. They are not only a nuisance about gardens, but they get underneath the iron roofs. But every so often a voice would speak up in defence of the useless brutes. This bill has not been submitted for the protection of native animals or in order to prevent their extinction, but to foster and keep up the trade in skins. I found letters to editors written by members of the Wildlife Preservation Society of Australia that touched my heart. It is a wicked thing to shoot such beautiful animals. We must take pride in our unique fauna if we are to have any sort of pride in our unique nation, and not send them to the brink of extinction. We must educate our children to love and cherish these creatures as they should love and cherish this country. I began to see that I was not so alone in my thinking, although like-minded individuals were in the minority. "What is the use of these animals?" one letter said. "They are of no use. I hope any bill to protect them will be thrown out, because they are a nuisance." Despite my bond with Angel, I changed the animal in my script from a possum to a native bear. The message was more important than the species. Possums were accused of all sorts of crimes against crops, while native bears were seen as benign. They looked like people, too, I thought, with their flat facial features. Lying back with its arms and legs spread out, a native bear almost resembled a child. Imelda, the beautiful artist's model at the cafe, turned out to be called Mabel. She gave me some invaluable insight. "I've been a vegetarian nearly all my life," she told me. "I would never harm an animal." When I asked her why, she lifted her skirt and pulled off her boot. Half her foot was missing. "I was going to be a dancer, but no chance of that after what happened. When the artists paint me, they drape satin over my feet." I stared at the injury, expecting a story about a shark bite. I was 7 years old when I put my foot in a steel jaw trap. My father used them to catch rabbits and foxes, but half the time we got wallabies and roos. I'd been having a fantasy about fairies living up on the mountain, so I'd snuck out of the house when my sisters weren't watching. It was 2 days before they found me, not having expected me to have gone so far. They dredged the dams and searched the wells, but I was up there on the mountain in agony, burning in the sun during the day and freezing during the cold, lonely night. My struggles to relieve the pain broke my bones and tore open my flesh. When they found me, I was covered in bulldog ants. The image of a little girl with her foot shattered in a trap left me speechless. Mabel looked me in the eye. I know the crushing grip of those traps, the ravens circling overhead ready to peck out my eyes. Who could subject an animal to that? I went home that day knowing what I had to do with my script. The leading lady was not going to tell her fiancé to stop when they hit the native bear with their car. She was not going to pick it up and wrap it in her expensive fur coat. Clara might have done something like that, but the average woman would no sooner think to help the bear than she would to nurse a sick rat. The woman would have a flicker of conscience, but nothing more. Then one night, after she has a fight with her fiancé, She walks away with him. Down the road, she is run over by a carload of drunk partygoers. They stop for a moment to see what they have struck. The woman cries out for help, but when they see a person lying on the road, they get back in their car and drive on, frightened of the consequences. The woman is left on the road all night with only her fur coat for comfort. As she lies there, she remembers the native bear in its agony throes. I sent the new script to Freddie. He arrived the following day at our house. "Now we're talking," he said with a grin. "Now we have something powerful. It will either soar or sink. Let's see which one." Once the script was ready, we auditioned actors. Hugh and I did the first rounds, and Freddie joined us for the final selection. The auditions took place in Freddie's drawing room, which was as macabre as his study. A stag's head hung above the mantelpiece, and a stuffed owl perched in the corner. But instead of being oblivious to my discomfort this time, Freddie seemed embarrassed. "They were my father's," he said, looking at the trophies as if seeing them for the first time. He was a keen hunter. I arrived the next day prepared to ask Freddie if we could move to another room, but the stag and owl were gone. In their place were a tasteful still life and a watercolor painting of a rosella. "They are beautiful," I told Freddie. He tugged his collar and smiled. "We are influencing each other." The two actors we chose to play the male leads, Andy Dale and Don Stanford, had been on stage since they were children. The role of our female lead proved more difficult to fill. We auditioned actresses and models before settling on a ballet dancer named Dolly Blackwood. Rather than mouth lines and pull faces, Dolly walked about, touching things, running her finger along the marble fireplace, stroking the chairs, gazing at her reflection in a mirror. There was something mysterious about her that was right for the part. Freddie described her as an Australian Louise Brooks. During the first day of rehearsals, Hugh filmed some of the key scenes. When we viewed the rushes the following morning, my blood turned cold. Dolly was luminescent, but Dale and Don were grotesque. Everything about them was out of proportion and twisted. We tried again the following day, but the result was the same. I woke up that night, unable to breathe. What made you think you could direct a film? I asked myself. My only experience at being a director was finishing off Peter's half-hearted attempt at a picture and directing my family in The Bunyip. This time I had two famous names in my production, and finance from not only Freddie, but investors such as Farmer's Department Store. I thought of the disaster looming when everyone realized that I did not know what I was doing. Then I remembered Aunt Josephine's faith in me and decided to act like a professional, and not like a child bursting into tears at the first sign of difficulty. I wrote to Raymond Longford, who Mr. Tilley had put me in touch with when I first became interested in making pictures. I told him that I admired his work and asked if he would meet with me and give me some advice on film technique. I waited for a reply, but nothing came. I grew desperate and lost more sleep. Then 2 days before we were scheduled to start filming, I received a note from him inviting me to afternoon tea. We agreed to meet at a tea house in Neutral Bay. I recognized Mr. Longford as soon as I stepped into the room with its lace curtains and velveteen chairs. He was sitting by the fireplace, a copy of the morning newspaper in his hands. He was exactly like the picture I had seen of him in Everyone's, smooth ivory skin and a mouth that looked on the brink of a smile. When he stood up to greet me, he towered above everything and had to bend to avoid hitting his head on the light shade that dangled above the table. The soft eyes framed by peaked eyebrows conveyed a great sadness. I did not have to ask why. "Lottie would have liked to be here to meet you," Mr. Longford said, pulling out my chair for me. She enjoys the company of intelligent women with talent, but she's busy reviewing some of the scenes for our next film." Mr. Longford was in denial. I had heard from Hugh, who was friends with his cameraman, that Mr. Longford's partner, Lottie Lyle, was too sick to do anything anymore, and that Fisher's Ghost, which had been released the previous year, was probably the last great Longford-Lyle collaboration. She was in the final throes of consumption. "If I had half Miss Lyle's talent, I should be blessed indeed," I told Mr. Longford. Tears welled in his eyes, and he turned his head to signal to the waiter, who alleviated further awkwardness by bringing a tray of tea and sponge cakes to the table. "Now, what is it that I can do for you?" Mr. Longford asked me. I told him that I was making my first feature picture, and I was experiencing trouble with the actors. What I wanted them to be on screen was not happening in the rushes. I had chosen Mr. Longford over other directors because I hoped he would have more respect for a female director due to his partnership with Lottie Lyle. Mr. Longford listened to me thoughtfully. "The technique the actors need for the stage and what is required for film are quite different things," he said. "It sounds as if your actors are projecting themselves too much. You mustn't make them run over and over their parts, as a theatre director might do. They mustn't be conscious of acting. Rather, they must live their parts and be the characters rather than act them. If you want your actor to convey that he loves a woman, let his gaze follow her out of the room rather than have him make dramatic gestures. That's why The Sentimental Bloke was praised so highly. Everyone appreciated the naturalness of the actors." I considered his advice and realized that he had pinpointed the problem. He also told me that I should treat the whole cast as if they were stars. Every performance counts towards the whole. When the waiter offered us more tea, we both gladly accepted. I was happy to see that Mr. Longford was enjoying talking to me as much as I was him. "But you know, Miss Rose," he said, rearranging the napkin on his lap, "the greatest problem you will face with your film is not the acting, nor your age, nor your sex. No, the biggest challenge facing you is that you are making a film about Australia. Have you heard of the Combine?" I shook my head, and Mr. Longford explained that the Combine referred to the merger of two companies, Australasian Films, which dominated production and distribution, and Union Theatres, which controlled 80% of Sydney cinemas. If it were not for the efforts of the Combine to crush the Australian film industry, we would be well ahead of the Americans. Mr. Longford must have noticed my surprise, for he was quick to continue. "Make no mistake, the Combine acts in the American industry's interest," he said. "It is much cheaper to import films than to make them. Before the war, Australian productions were quite crude, but when Lottie and I started making pictures like The Fatal Wedding and Margaret Catchpole for small sums and earning profits here and in England, we were perceived as a threat." I listened with interest while Mr. Longford went on to explain that the Combine had sabotaged The Silence of Dean Maitland by refusing it a release at Premier Theatres. "I had to go to an independent exhibitor," he said. "The Combine then threatened to cut off their supply of films if they screened any more Australian productions." I was even more appalled at the financial problems faced by local producers. Because Union Theatres wouldn't exhibit The Sentimental Bloke, I was offered the lowest price possible by Hoyt City Theatre, Mr. Longford said. "After 1 week of screening the film 3 times a day to full houses, they made a fortune, and I got £30. I glanced at the palm trees outside the window. The sky was growing dark. A waiter lit the fire and stoked up the flames.
It was unbelievable to me that the finest director in Australia was having so much trouble getting his films exhibited and was living a borderline existence when his films themselves were making profits. I reviewed my position. When I had asked Freddie about distribution, he had told me to concentrate on making the best film possible and that he would take care of the rest. "And Fisher's Ghost?" I asked. "How did that do?" Mr. Longford's thin lips broke into a smile. "Same story," he said. "Lottie and I made it for £1,000. It played to full houses and made everyone else a fortune. Our production company went broke." "But you managed to get it distributed?" "Not through the Combine," answered Mr. Longford. "Stuart Doyle of Union Theatres said it was gruesome." "I thought it was atmospheric," I told him. "Compared to a lot of American films, I would hardly have called it gruesome." Mr. Longford put down his cup. "It probably wasn't Mr. Doyle anyway, but his friend, Frederick Rockcliffe, who had that opinion. It's well known that Rockcliffe has a low opinion of Australian directors." The mention of Freddie's name fell like an iron on my head. If what Mr. Longford said was true, why was Freddie supporting me? I almost admitted to Mr. Longford who was producing my picture, but I hesitated. I liked Mr. Longford and thought he was a great artist, but there were other Australian directors producing good work too, and Beaumont Smith could get his films exhibited. Yet when Mr. Longford spoke, one would have thought he and Lottie Lyle were the only Australian directors of any note. In all my conversations with Freddie, he had seemed supportive of the idea of local production. He had only expressed a dislike of character studies and stories of down-and-outs, which was the genre Mr. Longford specialized in. Was it possible that this was not about a large firm trying to crush an artist, but rather a clash of personalities? Mr. Longford had presence, but he also had an ego, and so did Freddie. After another round of tea, the subject of our conversation changed from films to my homeland. "One would hardly detect an accent, although there is something exotic about you, Miss Rose," said Mr. Longford. "And yet, most encouragingly, I find you more passionately Australian than most Australians." I thanked him for what I considered a great compliment. Yes, I did feel passionately about my new homeland and its natural beauty. My mind drifted to Ranjana. She spoke with a perfect British accent, but until she adopted her sari again, she had not been accepted. It was dark outside when Mr. Longford and I agreed that we should head to our homes. Mr. Longford helped me with my coat and walked me to the wharf. Before I boarded the ferry, he tipped his hat to me and said, "You are very young, Miss Rose. You have so much to learn and so much ahead of you. I envy you, and in some ways I pity you, too." I waved to him as the ferry chugged off, leaving a wake of white foam in the black water. The next time I would see him, Lottie Lyle would be dead and his career in pictures would be over. Mr. Longford's words were an omen, even though I did not know it then. Chapter 18. When I told Clara and Robert that Raymond Longford had made Lottie Lyle and Arthur Taushet mingle with the poor of Woolloomooloo to prepare them for the sentimental bloke, Robert suggested that the actors of In the Dark live in his house while we were filming. "They should look as though they belong here," he said. Freddie agreed when I repeated Robert's suggestion to him. "The picture will be more convincing if the actors look natural in their surroundings. It should be the most normal thing in the world to them that someone else will clear a table after them or pick up their clothes." He bought Dolly a tailored dress to rehearse in, rather than the blouse and skirt she had been wearing. "It's not very comfortable," she complained. "Society women are never comfortable," Freddie told her, "but they always look smart."
Andy and Don spent their breaks playing tennis with Robert and finished their day by investigating the labels on the bottles above the bar. During one lunch break, I noticed that Esther, who was organizing the catering, had set her hair in waves. She looked beautiful. Robert and Freddie complimented her, but Hugh said nothing. Esther stared at Hugh longer than necessary each time she passed a plate or a piece of cutlery in his direction, but Hugh looked straight through her. She is besotted with him, I sighed. In the years we had lived with Esther, she had ceased to be our landlady. We were more like a family, and Esther, who had been an only child, often said she felt she was living with her sisters and brothers. I had been unlucky in love, but that did not mean I couldn't hope for the best for those I cared about. So what about Hugh? Was he oblivious to Esther's interest, or was he only shy? One afternoon, while Hugh and I were having a production meeting, Esther snuck into the room with a tray of tea and biscuits. She placed it on the table beside us without a word and crept out the door again. Hugh did not even look up. I could not stand it any longer. "Hugh, I want to talk to you about Esther," I said. "Who?" he asked, continuing to make notes on his script. "Esther," I repeated. Giallo jumped from Hugh's shoulder onto the table. "Esther!" he squawked. Hugh glanced up. "Oh, Esther," he said. "Yes?" "She likes you. She likes you a lot. As a man." Hugh stared at me with such incomprehension that at first it was comical. Then his eyes darkened. "I don't want any woman's sympathy. I know she lost her fiancé in the war and he was a hero and all that. Well, I'm not him." "I don't think she thinks you are," I said. "You remind her of him, but of course she knows you are someone different." Hugh turned back to his script and did not answer. "Don't you even think she's nice, Hugh?" "I don't think anything at all," he said, slamming the script on the table. Hugh had a gruff manner at the best of times, but I had never seen him lose his temper. It took me a few seconds to recover. "What are you angry about?" I asked him. "I'm only trying to help. Do you want to be alone all your life?" Hugh turned his back to me and muttered, "Yes, well, I don't say anything about you and Freddie." "What did you say?" I asked, not sure if I had heard correctly. Was Hugh jealous that Freddie had become so involved in the picture? "I'm here to make a picture with you," Hugh replied, "not to have my life interfered with. Can we get back to work?" I felt my face redden. Hugh had never spoken to me like that. We had always been equals. 4 eyes are better than 2 was our motto. He had reprimanded me as if I were a schoolgirl because I had pointed out Esther's interest. She was a lovely person, and he would be lucky to have her. "I'm the director of this film," I reminded him. "Be careful how you speak to me." Hugh did not respond to the rebuke. A chilly silence hung between us while he returned to writing on his script. He glanced up and noticed the tea tray. "Here," he said, pulling it towards us and pouring me a cup. "Let's say no more on the subject and concentrate on the picture. Agreed?" My anger softened when I heard his conciliatory tone. "Agreed," I answered. I was glad that the goodwill was restored between us. But when I looked at the freshly baked biscuits on the tray, I could not help feeling sorry for Esther. A few days after we finished filming, Uncle Ota wrote to say that he would be returning to Sydney with Ranjana and Thomas. Uncle Ota had found a manager for the Balgownie cinema, and Freddie had invited my uncle to become his partner. The 2 men intended to make an offer on Mr. Tilley's cinema, which Uncle Ota would manage himself in order to be with us. I was thrilled by the news. I had missed Uncle Ota and Ranjana, and especially Thomas. The house was not the same without his cheerful chatter. The same night, another friend returned. I was in the kitchen thinking about ideas for a new script when I heard a bump on the roof. The house had been silent until then, except for the occasional creak of its walls. I listened. Footsteps scurried along the roof, then came to a halt. A cat, I told myself. The steps were too heavy for a rat or a mouse. Something jumped into the tree outside the window. The leaves rustled, and two eyes glistened in the dark. A possum with one flat ear peered through the foliage. Angel! I grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and rushed outside. The possum was twice as big as the angel I remembered, but she did not run away when I approached her. Angel, I murmured, where have you been? I bit off a piece of apple and passed it to her. She clasped it in her paws and chewed it noisily. Something moved in her belly. A crimson nose and whiskers appeared and sniffed the air. Then a tiny head with pointed ears and bright eyes emerged from the pouch. "You've got a joey!" I cried. I sat on the back steps and watched Angel and her baby. The joey crawled out of Angel's pouch and onto her back. It nibbled the soft tips of leaves, while Angel crunched on the mature ones. I filled Angel in on everything that had happened since her disappearance. And you inspired my first picture, although I had to change your character to a native bear. When dawn broke, the joey crawled headfirst into Angel's pouch. Angel gave me a look before climbing up the silver gum tree and disappearing into a hollow. "Welcome home," I said. With Ranjana back in Sydney, I had someone I trusted to do the editing of In the Dark. But while the filming of the picture had been a cooperative effort, the editing did not go smoothly. "Cut that," Freddie told Ranjana after she had played a scene of a car moving along a country road. It was a beautifully composed sequence with the interplay of light and shade. "No," said Hugh, "you have to leave that. It builds up atmosphere." "It builds up nothing," said Freddie. "Cut it." "It is visually stunning," I said in Hugh's defense. "It's boring," said Freddie. "It slows the story down." We all liked working with each other, but never held back our opinions. Hugh and I were digging in our heels. Ranjana adjusted her tartan sari and rolled her eyes. "Look," she said, "I will play the previous scene, then I want you to cover your eyes and open them again when I tell you. That way you'll see what the picture looks like without the car." We did as she suggested and saw that Freddie was right. Hugh and I were thinking artistically, but the way Freddie wanted the picture edited made it jump from the screen. I realized I had to see the difference between what had seemed like a brilliant idea at the time and what worked. I nodded to Freddie and he smiled at me. It amused me to think that I had once found him annoying. He was dressing more elegantly these days, and after Clara had told him that I thought his garden was sterile, he had employed a new gardener, Rex, to make it leafier. The day we finished the last intertitle, I arrived home in the afternoon to find Uncle Ota sitting in the parlour by himself. The sight of his wet cheeks stopped me in my tracks. I had never seen my uncle cry before. "What is it?" I asked, my stomach clenching with fear that something had happened to Clara, Esther, or Thomas. Ranjana, I knew, was safe. I had just left her at the cinema. Then my eye fell to the letter in Uncle Ota's hand. I recognized Dr. Holub's handwriting. "Aunt Josephine," I asked. "Has something happened to Aunt Josephine?" Uncle Ota tried to say something, but he could not. I took the letter from him, and my gaze settled on the words. "It all happened within a matter of days. I assure you that your dear sister did not suffer long. We buried her with a picture of you and one of your nieces with their mother and father. Fripp is an old fellow now, but he is well taken care of by my wife. Although he misses his mistress, he has my 4 daughters to dote on him, so he does quite well in his new home. My eyes blurred. I could read no more. Uncle Ota looked at me. Influenza. There is a bout of it sweeping Europe again. I threw my arms around Uncle Ota and wept. Memories of Aunt Josephine and Fripp visiting us in Prague flooded back to me. Milos had not murdered Aunt Josephine as I had once feared he might, but he had robbed us of time with her. I remembered her letter from Marianske Lajne. She had sounded unwell then. Undoubtedly dealing with Milos had weakened her health and left her susceptible. I thought I would see her again, Uncle Ota told me, taking my hands in his trembling ones. She wasn't old. There was still time. I thought when Clara was 21 I would pay her a visit. A cloud fell over our household after the news of Aunt Josephine's death. Clara and Uncle Ota retreated into quiet moods, but somehow I could not. Aunt Josephine had encouraged me to be an independent woman, and I was sure the best way to honor her was to continue to work on my career. I imagined if she had known that I was soon to be one of only a handful of female directors, she would have been proud. I could not stop now, no matter how sad and lifeless I felt. Aunt Josephine had left her house to Uncle Ota to be managed for him by Dr. Holub. She had also left Clara and me £5,000 each, kept in safekeeping with Dr. Holub until we returned to Prague. £5,000 was the budget for In the Dark. It seemed almost symbolic. In the Dark was bought by Union Theatres for distribution. Freddie gave me the news when he turned up one evening in his new Bugatti sports car. He had invited me to the Wentworth Hotel to celebrate something special, although I suspected he was trying to cheer me up. "That's wonderful news, Freddie," I said when he opened the car door for me. "Wonderful news?" Freddie mimicked with a smirk. "You are hard to please." "Here," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Look at what Stuart Doyle had to say about you." He took out a sheet of paper and unfolded it. It was an article from Everyone's reporting an address Mr. Doyle had made to prove Australasians' films' support for local pictures. Miss Rose's film is exactly what distributors and exhibitors want. The kind of film that is capable of finding favour in all parts of the world. She has created a story that shows Australia in its glory without lapsing into clichés about bush life. We have sold the film to Britain, and there are other countries interested in it as well, including the United States. "The film has already been sold to Britain?" I asked. Freddie shut the car door and climbed into the driver's seat. "Sure has. They're expecting it to make good returns, too." I read the article again. Established directors would have been thrilled at the news, but my mind drifted to Philip. I felt oddly disappointed, as if my life were a surrogate dream, and what I most wanted was out of reach, and always would be. I often hoped that Robert might say something about Philip and Beatrice's life in London, but he was silent on the subject. Clara wanted to ask him, but I begged her not to. I knew it would be intruding on her blossoming relationship. At the Wentworth Hotel ballroom, the maitre d' led us to a table next to the dance floor. I had not been to a fine restaurant in years, and my eyes drank in the beaded gowns and diamonds that sparkled on the women around us. A waiter appeared at our table to take our order. I chose the vegetable stew, the only non-meat dish on the main menu, apart from the bread. I was surprised that Freddie ordered it too, when he could have chosen the roast lamb or beef Wellington. When the waiter left, Freddie turned to me. "Dolly Blackwood will be the next big star." "I know," I said. "I want to use her for my next film." "You won't," he said, taking a sip of champagne. "As soon as the Hollywood studios see her, they'll snap her up." "But we discovered her," I said. "Indeed," said Freddie with a smile. "We did." Something about the way Freddie had emphasized "we" embarrassed both of us. We fell into an awkward silence. We had never been self-conscious around each other before. There was something odd about him that night, apart from him ordering the vegetable stew. There was a nervous look in his eyes, and he kept fidgeting with his collar. Freddie never seemed to be concerned by anything. To protect his job with Galaxy Pictures, he had given the production credits on In the Dark to Robert, who acted as his front man for business transactions relating to the picture. "Aren't you afraid of losing your job if you are found out?" I had asked Freddie. It was apparent from his lavish lifestyle that he was paid a lot of money. "I only worry about things when they happen," he said. So, what was on his mind now? Was there a problem with the picture he was not telling me about? The waiter brought our food and the band started up. The music was loud, and I was grateful for it as an excuse not to speak to Freddie until the dessert arrived. "Peish Melba," he said, looking at the plate in front of him. "That brings back memories. That's the dessert we ate at Beatrice's luncheon the first time I met you." "So it is," I said. "I asked you what kind of pictures you wanted to make, and when you told me you liked Fritz Lang, I said that you'd never make any money." Freddie dabbed his lips with his napkin and laughed. "You must have thought I was rude." "You still are," I ribbed him. "I have just become used to it." After dessert, Freddie asked if I would like to dance. The band was playing a quick step. Freddie was light on his toes. We danced well together, despite our difference in size. The music stopped, and I expected Freddie to lead me back to the table. But he stood there, holding me in his arms. Then, with a suddenness that startled me, he lifted my hand to his lips and kissed it. "Adela, will you marry me?" I stared at him, not able to believe I had heard those words from Freddie. Was he drunk? No, I had only seen him sip one glass of champagne and one of brandy. "I've known for a long time that you're the woman for me," he said. My mind struggled to take in what was happening. I was fond of Freddie, but I had never thought of him romantically. He pulled me closer to him. "Look at your face," he said, and smiled. "I couldn't have shocked you more, could I? Have you never thought of marrying me?" I thought back over the past months. It became clear that Freddie's change in dress style, the disappearance of the dead animals from his house, and his remodeled garden had all been leading up to his proposal to me. But I had not seen it. The band played a waltz, and couples returned to the floor. Freddie was looking at me, waiting for an answer. I was too unraveled to give one. A frown came to his face. "How insensitive of me," he said, shaking his head. "I should have waited longer for you to grieve for your aunt." He is the eternal optimist, I thought. I had never given him any reason to think that I was in love with him, but he was confident that to receive, he simply had to ask. "It's not that," I told him. "I don't see myself getting over my aunt's death, but we still have to live." I wanted to tell him the truth. Hadn't he said himself that mincing words showed a lack of respect? I was about to explain that I could not forget my past, that I was still in love with Philip and always would be, when he threw back his head and laughed. "Oh, I understand," he said, pulling me towards him again. I'm used to American gals. I'd forgotten how traditional you European ladies are. I should have asked your uncle first. Is that it? Well, my darling, I'll do that tomorrow, and then you can say yes. All right? The evening had taken a strange turn, but at least I had been given a reprieve. Freddie took me home after midnight when the household, including Clara, was already asleep. I washed my face and hands, brushed my hair, and cleaned my teeth, but when I climbed into bed I was still wide awake. I realized that I would not be able to wait until the morning to tell somebody what had happened. I shook Clara's shoulder. "Freddie," she said, sitting up and turning on the light when I told her what had passed. "Freddie asked you to marry him." "Shh," I said. "I'm not ready for the whole household to know." Clara beamed from ear to ear. "I like Freddie. He would—" She must have noticed the uncertainty on my face because she stopped herself. "What is it?" she asked. I could not find the words to answer her. In the end, I did not have to. "Adelka, because you can't be with Philip does not mean you can't be happy," she said. "He loved you so much, but he was already involved with Beatrice when he met you. He would be heartbroken if because of him you never married or experienced the joy of having children of your own." I climbed out of bed and looked out the window. Robert would propose to Clara as soon as she finished her studies. I was sure of it. I would be alone, like Esther and Hugh, longing for a past that could never be lived again. What Uncle Ota had said about Emily came back to me. I'm not going to give you any platitudes about time healing all wounds. I will never forget the woman I gave my youthful heart to and lost tragically, but I am deeply happy with Ranjana. Sometimes your true companion turns up in a surprising place. Was Freddie my true companion turning up in a surprising place? I had enjoyed arriving on the set of In the Dark every morning and seeing him there, because I benefited from the challenges he was always throwing me. If I had become a good director, it was due to him. Freddie was intelligent and full of life. I thought of his house in Cremorne and the changes he had made to it, and himself, to please me. I was looking at a life that I had not envisaged until this moment. But to enter it, to even consider it, I would have to forget Philip. "Freddie is going to ask Uncle Ota's permission tomorrow," I told Clara. "Uncle Ota will say yes if that is what you want. He likes Freddie. He has always said so." I rested my head against the cool window glass. Freddie had held me in his arms when he proposed to me. I had felt safe in his embrace. It was like being wrapped in a warm coat on a windy day. "Freddie makes you laugh," Clara said. "He will make you happy. I am sure of it. Are you going to say yes?" I trembled with the trepidation of someone turning away from one path and committing themselves solely to another. Aunt Josephine had been against marriage because she saw it as the end of a woman's independence. But things would be different with Freddie. He supported my career. I could have the best of both worlds. "Yes," I told her. "Yes, I am." I clenched my fists, knowing that my life was about to change as surely as my name. Freddie was a wonderful person, and the more I knew of him, the more I liked him. Philip's face flashed into my mind, but I turned my thoughts away from past memories. I would think only of Freddie from now on. "Mrs. Adela Rockcliffe," I whispered. "Mrs. Frederick Rockcliffe," Clara corrected me. "Mrs. Frederick Rockcliffe," I repeated. I had made my decision.